sorry.
If you're in good company, Brenda always.
All right, thank you. All right, we have no delegations off the top, but for the big presentation of the night, we are going to go to the Senior of the Year Award, and Jane Warchin is going to get us started. Jane.
I am very excited tonight to just start off the introduction of Senior of the Year. It's a very exciting time, and it's so lovely to be surrounded by so many people who have been participating in some of our committees that are older adult based. And the unique thing about Senior of the Year, it's always a surprise. So there is somebody in this room who will be receiving the award and they have no idea. So I'm going to pass this over to Angela so she can make the announcement of our Senior of the Year award winner. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. It's my pleasure to do so this evening. So each year, the Government of Ontario celebrates the accomplishments and achievement of many wonderful seniors aged 65 and beyond who make a significant voluntary and professional contribution in their community. The City of Waterloo is proud to recognize Rick Chambers as our city's 2017 Senior of the Year Award recipient. In a few minutes, Rick, you can speak after me. Okay.
I can what?
Rick's involvement in whatever he does is always valued, and individuals who interact with him recognize his strength of leadership and character. Some of the highlights of Rick's contributions and accomplishments are chairperson of the City of Waterloo 55 Plus Advisory Board from 2013 to 2016. He's an active member of the City of Waterloo Age Friendly Committee. He's a volunteer facilitator and presenter at the City of Waterloo Friday Flick Drop-In program. He volunteers his piano playing talents during the meal program served to seniors at the Adult Recreation Centre. Rick took the lead in collaborating with University of Waterloo and Laurier student leaders to work with city staff and the region to review and discuss the ION stations to ensure accessibility and ensure appropriate navigation is reviewed and discussed in relation to students and seniors. Rick partnered with high school students and elementary students for the 2015 Mayor's Age Friendly Forum and orchestrated the delivery of an intergenerational presentation that was well received and praised by all participants. Rick is a frequent participant of focus groups linked to city initiatives that have an impact and interest to seniors, and he shares his insights, passion, and wisdom. He is also an active member in the strategic planning at his church, First United Church. Rick is the type of individual who makes Waterloo a better place by his ongoing eagerness to seek improvements and his pride of being a contributing member to the community. Thank you, Rick, for making Waterloo a great place to live. Mayor Jaworski has an award to present.
A long speech which is completely impromptu and certainly not expected. So thank you very much to Council and to everyone who made this possible. I'll cherish this. I know some of the other folks who have been Seniors of the Year, and generally they're a lot older than I am. And so I'm a little surprised, but I'm very pleased that I have this honor. Compared to some of the other people that I know who work in a voluntary capacity with the city and a lot of its activities, I think my contribution has not been as great as others, but I really appreciate this honor, and I'll look forward to talking to you again in a few minutes when we talk about the Adult Rec Center. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. We are going to move on to our consent agenda. We will get to the older adult recreation strategy in a moment, but first we have consent agenda. There's 3 items on it. Do I have a mover? Councillor Whaley, seconder. Councillor Burke, all in favor? Excellent. So moving on to our staff reports. And it seems like we have a full house here, so we've opened up, just for the people who's standing at the back, we've opened up the herb room so you can have a seat there. To staff reports. So the City of Waterloo Water Distribution Master Plan 2017. It was prepared by Milos. You're here to take any questions. Excellent. Are there any questions of staff? No presentation. All right, Councillor Whaley.
We look at the financial implications over the next many years, and the one that really stands out is Cluster E, $40,435,000 for the replacement and upsizing of water mains for the core. And that is a big, big ticket, 40 million bucks. How much of this is going to be paid for by development charges?
Good evening, through you, Councillor Durrell, to Councillor Whaley. Tonight with me here I have our Director of Services, Mr. Phil Quickfall, and our project manager from the consulting firm GM Blueprint Engineering, Mr. Julian Bell. So I will turn the mic over to him and then I can comment on it as well.
Okay, for this item in particular, the reason why it stands out so much compared to the other ones is that we did take out the full cost of those projects relative to the other ones, because a portion of it would be tied to growth and development within the downtown core. This is the total cost for replacement, and it's my understanding that the DC is still being done, but as part of the master plan, it was generally understood that about half of this cost would be associated towards growth, and that the remaining cost would be associated to your existing state of good repair asset renewal program.
Answer, and I know Mr. Rapp's going to weigh in on this. Most of this is spent in the core, and I wonder why a lot of this cost wasn't picked up as we ripped up our streets for the LRT. Why such a big bill after that?
So this is the cost for the downtown core, which has been defined in the master plan as a rather large scope of area, and that these are all projects that are planned to be aligned with other roadworks and other projects within the downtown area. It's my understanding that along the LRT corridors, a lot of the water mains were already of sufficient size and would not have been specifically flagged within this, but any of those water mains would not be specifically a new project, but would be aligned with your existing state of good repair. So this $40 million is for replacement of all the water mains over the 25-year time horizon.
Mr. Rapp, we're not really surprised by this huge number, because we have been planning for and saving for this expenditure for the last many years, and it shouldn't be a jolt to the tax rate, should it?
Through your chair, Durrell, to Councillor Whaley. No, this is not a surprise. It is part of even our asset management plan that we brought forward. It's part and parcel of that. It took a long time to get where we are. It'll take us a long time to become, I'll call it perfect, which this type of thing would solve. As was expressed, half of this, give or take, could be part of development charges. And with respect to the ION, we've made sure that we've moved all infrastructure from underneath the track bed. That was the key part, and that we've done all those upgrades. That's really what the bulk of the work was for the last year or so. So we're in pretty good shape now. Thank you.
We're getting there. Any other questions? Mover? Mayor Jaworski, seconder, Councillor Veith. All in favor? Moved. All right. And next up is 2305 and 2415 University Avenue land disposition. We have a presentation by Ryan Mounsey, our Manager of Expansion and Retention Services. Mr. Mounsey, I know I saw him. There he is. Mr. Mounsey, come on up.
Madam Chair, Mayor, Council, thank you for having me tonight. I'm here tonight to present land disposition decision, and I'm going to go through some background material on the two properties that were in the Waterloo Chronicle in April 20th. That was about 3 weeks ago. It was in the paper. And very simply, the City of Waterloo, by context, is a very large property owner, and we have a process that's established by bylaw to dispose of land, and we have to follow that process following certain steps, and we're here tonight as part of that, that bylaw procedural steps. In 2001, the City of Waterloo worked on a subdivision plan to extend University Avenue to Northfield Drive. That's a big construction project to widen and to align University Avenue. And along the way, the city created some lots, and through a process for a couple years, sold some of those lots in the early part, and we have two remnant lots that have been on title for about 18 years. And in 2016, we were approached by a real estate company, Colliers, and Colliers was retained by a client to acquire some land for a tenant who's growing in Waterloo. And in response to that, we initiated the disposition process to review the opportunity to consider selling two properties. The one property in particular has an ability to accommodate the tenant for long-term needs, subject to further details. So Red Rock 2016 Investments Inc. Is the potential buyer, and we went through and put the notice for disposition in the paper. Economic Development didn't initiate this, and we have two appraisals that were available at Clerks upon the date of the notification, and available, and it provides the appraised value of the two lots. In terms of location, the properties are located at the very end of University Avenue by Northfield Drive. It's right across from the Blackberry headquarters. And it's the property's addresses are 2415 University Avenue East. It's a corner property that's located on Northfield and University Avenue. It's about 1.8 acres in size. It's irregular in shape, and it's bound, it has access with a reserve on the back of it onto Country Squire Road. There is a pumping station that butts it and a stormwater management pond, so it's the corner property. I'll just highlight it here with the mouse. The zoning on the properties, on both properties, are industrial 1-6, so it's an industrial property. There's only a limited range of industrial uses you can put on it, as well as office and some complementary uses. And so that's what the zoning is today, and it's subject to the city's comprehensive zone change process that's underway right now that may do some tweaks on the property. The second, I'll just note as well on this property, there is an easement over the property on the back edge, and the easement's to provide access to the stormwater management pond. So that's a piece of the property that has to be kept in mind. The other property is a smaller property on 2305 University Avenue East. It's about 1.3 acres inside. It's smaller. It has the same zoning I-16, and there's surplus grading on this property. It's important to note when you stand on the sidewalk, I'll show you a photo, there's quite a bit of fill on the property. Well, during the construction process, the extra land or the extra material was put on that property, so it does come with some strings attached. In both cases, the properties have access to services. It's not to the property line, but it's in the center road, and that's a little unusual because there's no access to services to the front property line, and we have to accommodate that in a disposition process. In terms of the lot reserves, there are lot reserves along the edges of the properties, and that can be released during the development approval process following council's decision. Just note, by way of one minor correction and detail, is that I did call a lot wide or a lot reserve on the 2305 property. It's actually an easement for Hydro 1, so just a little minor point. In terms of the photograph on 2415, it's a corner property. It's relatively flat with a gentle rolling grade to it, and this is again located across from the Blackberry campus. And I just simply note that there's some limited vegetation on it, and it's relatively flat. This is the 2305 property, and you can notice the substantive grade change going across the property, and it does taper back at the rear of the property closer to the stormwater management pond, but there's about, by simple math, about 116 to 120 truckloads of dirt on the property. In terms of the appraisal, very simply, I just did a table format for this presentation. The appraised value of the properties came out, there are different values. So the higher value property is the 2415 property because it's a corner property, it has greater visibility, and the appraiser indicated it's a slightly higher value. So based off 1.84 acres, it's about $769,000 as a recommended price. That's on the very high end, subject to some potential adjustments. The 2305 property is smaller and it has less access, and it was evaluated in the range of about $515,000 based off the 1.3 acre property. The adjustments we put in the report to indicate, if you will, some credits to the property. The credits relate to service connections. On the 2305 University property, there's an estimated $20,800 of engineering work to connect services. That has to be confirmed, and it's slightly more on the corner property at $24,050. Of note, we've estimated the cost to relocate the fill on the one property, and we put a line item in there for about $75,000, and that will be confirmed through the detailed stages, but as an estimate based off the information we have today. There is a real estate commission fee that's tied to this one, and if I didn't make it clear, the reason why we're presenting this disposition process is that we're reacting to an offer on the property. The city has received a proposal and agreement of purchase and sale, and we're responding to that as it relates to the two properties, with one of the properties aimed specifically at a tenant in Waterloo to accommodate their growth. In terms of the proposals on a per acre basis, I just note that the total cost within the range of the project is $1.1 million to $1.3 million based off the appraiser, and the proposal that we received without adjustments came in at $1.243 million, which is right in the middle. And again, we have to factor in the adjustments. In terms of the financial implications, we worked with our finance team, and what was identified through this is that the City of Waterloo, and Brad Witzel's here if there's any questions, but we have an industrial lands account, and that account has about $1.1 million in the account, and that was to service and to cost the stormwater management pond and the creation of the lots. And so the proposed value of the price actually comes in slightly above that, but when you net out the adjustments that are estimated, we're getting pretty close to closing down that account. And so there's an opportunity to have a near balanced books for this part of the industrial lands account. There is a recommendation to transfer about $42,000. It's $42,128 from the general industrial lands to the new Eastbridge Industrial Reserve account, and then that will close that account, which has been opened for a while. So in terms of potential growth and impact, we did a preliminary analysis based off some assumptions, and what we found is that if you have a 15,000 square foot building and a 30,000 square foot building, probably office, the annual property taxes would be about $98,000 total and $196,000 for the larger building. The city's share is about $20,000 for the smaller property and $40,000 for the larger on simple assumptions. And the jobs it can create is about 60 to 75 jobs in the smaller property and about 100 to 150 on the larger property. So that's the range, and it tells you the economic impacts if the decision were to move forward. In terms of the conditions of sale, because we received an offer on the property, this is very important in terms of the go-forward decision. There's a 60-day due diligence on the two parcels, and that due diligence includes a background review, reviewing the file information, and following today's decision, whatever it may be, that would allow the future purchaser to go on the property and do their own tests and to see if a development can fit onto their needs. In terms of doing a phase 1 environmental site assessment, that would be part of the process, but it would be the buyer's expense, not the city's. We would have to include some price adjustments based off the criteria, and that would be worked through the final agreement of purchase and sale following today's decision. And in terms of 2305, what's really important on the smaller property is that there's performance criteria tied to this proposal. What's very important is that there's a closing date of September 29th for the smaller property. That's when the property could close for the first property, and to build within 1 year. So this group is actually coming in to saying that they're willing to build and work through the approval process and to give that performance standard. On the larger property, this group would move to the second property after the first build, and there's timelines built in there. So the closing date's a little bit later, at December 1st, 2017, proposed. The start construction will be within 2 years of closing. So in total, about a 3-year process. But you're basically guaranteed both projects to be under construction being built. If not, there's a 90% buyback, and the city retains the right to buy back the property at 90 cents on the dollar. So Factoring in some other conditions that relate to lot reserves in terms of easements that you have to respect and maintain. That'd be all part of the potential agreement of purchase and sale. So I know you have a full meeting tonight, but I'll just walk you through the recommendations in the report. The first one is to receive the information, the report, to approve the report. The second one is to actually declare the land surplus. That is required by bylaw. You have to declare both properties as surplus before we can move forward. If council chooses to move to declare it surplus land, you can move ahead with the next recommendations is actually to sell the specific parcels of land to the proposed purchaser, Red Rock 26 Investments, at the purchase price of $495, and then you have to deduct the adjustments. And then the second property would be to move it, at $748,000 minus the adjustments there. So the fifth recommendation is to allow the mayor and clerk to be authorized to execute all documents and complete the transactions subject to the approval of the Director of Legal Services. So our legal team, who is here tonight, would have the ability to fine-tune the agreements. And in terms of the net proceeds of the balance of transferring the approved funds into the industrial lands account so that we can close it off and to transfer the money. That, as a very brief overview, presents the disposition process, the steps, and the potential purpose, and to recognize that there's opportunity for some people to certainly talk about the proposal that we may or may not have talked to. Happy to answer any questions with the team.
Thank you, Mr. Mounsey. Councillor Whaley has put up his hand.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Industrial land, my, what a precious commodity that is in Waterloo. In fact, there's almost none left. This is one of the last remaining pieces we have. So I'm curious to try to understand. We have the smaller property has a mound of dirt on top, and you say it's going to cost us, the city, $75,000 to dispose of that dirt that's on the property. I don't get why we'd have to do that in a market like this with precious little industrial land available at all, that we'd have to have that extra expense.
Madam Chair, if I can answer that.
Yes, please.
Great question, Councillor Whaley. What we've done is we followed our standard procedures of estimating the potential cost to relocate that. That's the cost we'd estimate at this point in terms of relocating an off-site to another location and to have 2 excavators and the trucks to move that volume of dirt. There may be opportunities, and part of our agreement is that we'd look for the opportunity to identify potential people in need of fill. And that issue actually might be able to resolve itself over time or the next number of months to see if someone's looking for fill. So we're exploring all options. We have a project team on this in terms of trying to find out what to do with this surplus fill. And it's just a decision that has caught up to us, and we have to make a decision on it. But we're exploring all options.
Thank you. Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through the chair. You mentioned, I think you said this has been sitting around for nearly 2 decades, 18 years. And have we had offers on it at this point, like any interest on these lands, like on the fringe of town there?
Through you, Madam Chair. Mayor Jaworski, the City of Waterloo has one of the tightest markets in terms of real estate around, excluding a few buildings. And we have a very tight industrial market as well, and that's why we're moving ahead with the West Side employment lands. In terms of lands we have, to your question, is that we haven't received any formal proposals on those 2 lots specifically. We've had formals for larger parcels, and we're not able to accommodate those ones at this moment or this time. And so we're responding close to after 18 years with an existing business in Waterloo that has the ability to grow. And through the realtor and callers, we responded to that. So it's been a while for those properties.
Okay. And then it looks, netting it all out, we're essentially selling for approximately market value, yet with strings attached in terms of performance of putting up an office and bringing in jobs here and that sort of thing, right?
Through you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. We're responding to this because it has a strict performance set of criteria with it. We have an interested and motivated buyer that's willing to build and to add jobs to the community. We have a larger industrial project on the west side that's the larger play and has a bigger employment opportunity, so our energies have been focused on that side, which the request for proposal already went out. And so I think in terms of responding to these parcels right now, these are ones that have very tight specific performance standards, and if they don't build, we can buy the lands at 90 cents per dollar. So again, it's a win-win that way based off the proposal received to date.
Thank you, Mr. Mounsey. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this item? Yes. Oh, you have to come on up and give your name and the city that you live in.
Thanks. Kevin Reed, 128 Graham Street, Waterloo. I'm just wondering why we got a nice appraised value on that property, and it seems like there's a limited supply on industrial land, as was just mentioned. Why wouldn't you put this on the market? And I know we have somebody proposing, but why wouldn't you put it on the market with those strings attached and see whether you can get more money than what's there? I know it's market-based, and the appraisal says that, but if there's a limited supply and people want to build here, why Colliers? Why not more somebody else who's going to pay more money?
Thank you for your question. Is that to you, Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. Our core focus right now has been through Justin McFadden. His project team is moving ahead with the west side employment lands. That's the area that has the greatest employment potential. To the guests and neighborhood question on there, we are actively moving on other properties. So right now, we did put the project in the paper. There's people that have expressed interest to us, but they decided not to follow through. And so we do have an interested buyer at this that's falling within the range and is able to actually build. There's a difference between selling land and building on land, and based off the decision we have, someone that's willing to build on it was a good time to move on the project. If we were just selling land to hold it vacant for another 5-10 years, that's not quite in our interest at the moment. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mounsey. Yes, sir. Name and the city you live in, please.
Waterloo. My only big question is, I don't have a problem with expansion or anything, but my sewer and water goes up exponentially every year. So when you put more into where you want to go, there's obviously going to be more people. Who pays for the sewer and water upgrade?
Sorry,
and
sir.
where does the water come from?
Can you give us your name, please?
Dennis Trendle.
Thank you.
In Waterloo.
It's not really related to the to this.
Yes, it's the expansion in general. So there's going to be more people there. There's going to be more sewer used. There's going to be more water used.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think Mr. Mounsey is going to try to answer this.
Thank you for the question, and Madam Chair, and there's others here that can certainly enhance the question or the answer that I'll provide. Development's required to pay for the development charges, and it pays for the upgrade of services. So every project that comes in the city, unless there's an exemption, pays the development charges fees, and that's to pay for the eventual upgrade of new services and new development. So this project would be subject to development charge fees and levies that would be applied to it. There's a pumping station out in this area that was installed specifically for growth, and so this development will not exceed the limitations of capacity on the existing system. Down the road there may be upgrades required, but that's the purpose of development charges, is to pay for that growth. So this is a relatively strategically important but modest scale project, and it's about the incremental growth of expansion, and we haven't had a lot of development in this part of the city for the last couple of years, so this is a good positive sign to see that people are willing to build on that edge. The traffic impacts are quite limited. There's restricted access on the property, so that's been reviewed from a transportation perspective, and everything works from a transportation and engineering perspective so far, and perhaps there's one or two other folks that can talk about the sewer rates.
Certainly, Councillor Jurrell. The utility model does not allow for any subsidization. So the user rates are based on the actual use. So any new development house or industrial property will pay based on use. And as I said, there's zero subsidization. Maintenance is covered by the user rates, by everybody, so to maintain an existing. So if a pipe is corroded, water main breaks, things like that are covered by everybody. But as Mr. Mounsey mentioned, any growth related, so extra depth, extra size of pipe, or upgrades to the pumps or anything at the pumping stations are all growth related. and
Thank
directly
you.
borne by the development industry.
Thank you. We have a recommendation in front of us. Mayor Jaworski is moving the motion, seconded by Councillor Freeman. This is your ward. All those in, is it? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say that I think that, these lands have sat here for 18 years, available for anybody to express an interest in. Now that we have somebody who's actually building and growing in our community, bringing in 75 more jobs within the city of Waterloo, willing to pay us $1 million plus development charges for lands that were intended for development, I think this is a great win-win for the city and a great job by the economic development team.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this? Councillor Freeman?
Through Chair Durrell, I think all I would add to that is that we can't keep holding land forever. It's intended for building jobs and building the economy, and that's what this land is going to achieve. And it has always been the goal of not just our economic development team, but the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation. So I appreciate that you've found a future employer, and I think that it will, it'll add to that gateway feeling at that intersection, because right now it doesn't quite feel like the beginning of Waterloo, even though it is.
Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. All right, I think that there's quite a few people in the house tonight that are here for this older adult recreation strategy. So we're getting an implementation progress update report. And we'll welcome you back, Ms. Worshin.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of council. It is with great pleasure that I'm able to provide an update on our older adult strategy through the Senior Services Division. This strategy was approved by Council in June of 2015, and it included 24 recommendations in 5 areas of focus. And those areas were program development, volunteers, fees and charges, recreation facilities, and funded programs through the Waterloo-Wellington Local Health Integrated Network. The strategy was to be implemented over a 5-year period, and 2 years into the implementation, we have progressed on 11 of those 24 recommendations. Some of the progress highlights, we've had some new recreation programs to increase the variety and range of locations that we offer. We've listed a few of them. Some of the highlights, our ukulele program has just been soaring with great participation. Our knitting group is a very active and vibrant group. We've expanded some of our fitness programs to Rim Park, to mention a few. We've increased 30% of our registered program participants since 2014. Some other highlights we've had, our affiliated program evaluation is underway. Our drop-in rates for registered programs has been established to allow for a greater sense of flexibility for our participants. We've had some free drop-in sessions offered to allow customers to try out a registered program. And very much praise given to many of the members who are sitting in the seats here tonight, have rallied to have our program and activity guide moved from the electronic version back to the printed version, and that has been much appreciated and valued over the last year and a half. We've also put some energy into new promotional material to reach our older adult community. We've done some new approach to setting registered program fees to allow for a broader range of programs and allowing for various price points. We've also had room rental fee completed, and that allows each facility within the city to offer a room at a lower rate of $20 per hour. We're also exploring opportunities to increase the walking track access, and that will be discussed further in the facility study review. So it's been some exciting time over the last few years, and I open it up for any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Councillor Veith.
Through you, Chair Durrell. Thank you, Jane, for that. I just wondered, have we considered any kind of, I don't know how do seniors pay for these programs? Is there any consideration of like a card or something that they could load up for their programs and maybe for library and for getting on the ION down the road? Or has anything like that been considered?
At present, our fee rates can be done on a per program, registered or drop-in basis, and a Participass. At this point, those are done through a card method, not a loaded card like you would get at Tim Hortons or other locations. But certainly those could be options of future consideration. Thank you.
Mayor Jaworski.
Well, thank you very much, Jane, for that. Just some question on that. With respect to some of the things I've heard before, when people are doing hobbies, the storage of their materials always seems to be a sense of frustration for people in storage room that we always seem to be short of. And I saw in the report, an extensive report of 100 pages, that there was some talk about that. Maybe you could expand a bit on it, what we know and what our plans might be.
For sure. I would so very willingly offer a tour of our current storage status right now in our buildings. They are at absolute capacity, and certainly with respect to expansion or development of programs, that's a consideration for us. Having appropriate storage, and most importantly, having items that are relevant and well utilized and used and aligned to the location in which the programs or services are being offered, and having some consideration for what makes sense. Are there some opportunities for some shared resources based on the location of activity? However, I do feel that storage will always be an element that creates great realm of ponder for us.
Thanks. And the room fees, you mentioned the reduced room fees. Are those something that are in place now, or will come to us in the summer time frame at the reduction, or at the adjustment time frame?
Right. Those fees are already in place.
Okay. And then finally, I saw some references in the report about Waterloo Public Library, but not extensive reference to it. And I'm not sure if that's because the report is really focused on recreational needs versus learning needs, but there is some sort of overlap, and I wondered what discussions might take place going forward. And I see Beth.
For sure, I'll answer a portion of that. I see Beth also has her hand up to contribute. Our program staff continue to connect with our programmers at the library for activities within our buildings, and we've had some really exciting opportunities of shared resources from that perspective. Our LIN programs actually had some of the members from the library come to do some education opportunities with our Senior Outing Day program. So there's been some opportunities of shared resources from that perspective. And I feel Beth also may have some other elements to contribute.
From the perspective of the rec center expansion needs assessment report that we'll be discussing next tonight, we have had discussion with the library about the possibility of a small lending collection in any new facility that we build, and there was interest in that. In terms of programming, as Jane mentioned, our staff are always looking for opportunities to collaborate, and certainly the kinds of spaces that we're looking at building moving forward on this project are intended to be flexible spaces that could be used for a broad range of activities. And we would be happy to continue our discussions with the library about that.
And Beth is right. I've read right through both reports, so I'm speaking to both of them right now, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I have one question for you. I still get to ask a question. So the number that jumped out at me was a 30% increase in participation. So why do you think that is? Did we do anything different over the last couple of years, or what's happening?
Well, I think it's just our ability to network with individuals. Our staff do a wonderful job at connecting both in our print and media, and just the one-on-one. I think when there's a program where people are excited about the opportunity, they start spreading the word and having other participants come out. And I think that we've tapped into some really creative programs that have just seen a very strong flourish of attendance as well.
New programs then are, you think,
For
is
sure.
what's attributing to that? Interesting. Okay, thank you. Councillor Burke, sorry.
Well, that's okay.
I gotcha.
And first of all, I went to one of the first consultation sessions, and it was ridiculously packed. And that's just testimony to how much people care about this. But one thing that often strikes me is we ask people to come to our programs, and how, in an age when we're trying to get people to stay in their homes and build their neighborhoods, how can we get our programs out to there? Is there an opportunity to move things out to areas where there isn't a rec complex and where there isn't a RIM, because we have an entire half of the city where there isn't that kind of program, that we can move these programs out there, perhaps in concert with some other organization that at this point is unnamed? If you understand what I'm saying, can we get those programs out so even more people can get the benefits of them?
Madam Chair, to Councillor Burke, that is certainly a collaboration and partnership with either our neighborhood associations or some of our retirement homes has been one of the things that staff have looked into, and certainly down the road would be an opportunity to try to see if there are some opportunities to make some of those collaborations, whether it's providing some of our core program ideas and moving that out into niches in the community that might be a good fit for sure. Certainly something we can look at in the future.
Thanks. I think you're all done now. I think we're good.
Great.
And we have
Thank
a recommendation in front of us. Councillor Whaley, moving it. Councillor Veith, seconding it. Anyone like to make a comment? Then let's, all in favor. That's unanimous. And let's still talk about older adults as we move into the next presentation. The Waterloo Memorial Recreation Center and Older Adult Center's Facility Integration and Development Study Phase 1 Needs Assessment. I think we could use a longer name for that, Beth.
I have tried.
Yeah. We can. Maybe we need an acronym there. So we're going to start the first presentation off with Beth Rajanovic. Did I get it? Who's our policy and performance analyst. And Beth, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Council. I'm going to turn things over in a minute to Mr. Hack, who's here this evening, our consulting company on this project from Sierra Planning and Management. But just to remind Council that we were last here in August 2016, seeking direction on starting the needs assessment for this project, which is looking at two separate but combined aspects. One, possible replacement of the ARC and or the Wing 404, and second, an expansion of the rec center to accommodate growth of our community. We're here tonight to bring you that needs assessment and are looking for approval to move on to the next phase of the project, which is a feasibility study looking at both of those components. So I will turn it over to Mr. Hack now for his presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair, members of committee. I will run through a brief presentation just on behalf of Perkins and Will and myself. I'm John Hack with Sierra Planning and Management, and this focuses on the needs part of the equation of this study. As Beth had mentioned, there really are two halves to this, two aims. One is to recognize the needs of older adults through consideration of rebuild and replacement of the ARC as well as the Wing 404 adult recreation complexes, but then also in addition to that, to recognize that now is an opportunity to look at general recreation needs in the community as a whole, because the population is changing, and I'll speak to very briefly some of those changes which are occurring. In terms of the consulting team, Perkins and Will are the design firm that will run through the project if approved to continue the concept development. Where we are in the process is the work that we're leading in looking at really needs and opportunities, and then again the feasibility, what can be built at what cost to meet these needs that we identify. That really is more the work that my company is doing. In terms of the work plan highlights, we started in the fall of last year, around beginning of November, and since that time have done a considerable amount of work, which culminates in that fairly large report. It's not the biggest report we've written, thankfully, but it's involved visioning and guiding principles, which is essential to the process, and then looking at needs, and also needs and opportunities as well, and then looking at the particular opportunities for alternative sites, and then coming up with some recommendations that we have today. Central to this is really a consideration of some of the best practices that whereas a generation before we might have seen a lot of recreation planning, particularly as it relates to the needs of youths and seniors in particular, as two opposite ends of the spectrum, and the dedication of those facilities means that they're built in standalone venues. I think everything in terms of both service delivery but also facilities planning has moved away from that, and so conceptually what we are doing is looking at a number of things, but it's really the interplay between meeting recreation needs and the needs specifically to the older adult population in the city and region, and the extent therefore that we can achieve cost savings as well as service improvements to the citizenry as a whole. The consultation that happened involved, as I mentioned, visioning. So in November of last year, some internal visioning with key members of the staff, and I should mention that the consulting team writes the reports, but the work involved is based on the solid contribution and efforts provided by staff of the ARC, Wing 404, and the city as a whole. As a result of that, we undertook a number of focus groups and visioning sessions in November, December of last year. In January of this year, we held 2 community workshops for the community at large, and then also there was an online survey undertaken via Engage Waterloo, all looking at the question of need, opportunity, aspiration, what works, what doesn't work, what can be improved. And so there, as a result, you see some of the spaces that were articulated in that, and we've broken it down into some of the more general recreation needs, but then also some of the specific needs to the older adult population. I'll just hit on a couple of those a little bit later on, but you can see it's a fairly broad range, and there's some obvious overlap straight away in terms of what the opportunities are. You can see kitchen and storage there, just to be two of the more obvious ones. Just want to take a moment just to bring everyone up to speed. When doing a study like this, we are kind of reliant on the information, and so as of up until around February of this year, we're relying on the 2011 census. Since then, the census has started to now report information, the most recent of which was last Wednesday, when the age and sex data for Canada as a whole came out, and if you've read the papers, you'll see that the issue is that Canada is aging quite considerably, and now the population aged 65 or over has witnessed the largest increase in that cohort in I think 70 or 75 years, larger as a population group than children aged 14 and under, nationally speaking, and it varies considerably. But the point being that the requirements to plan for an effective strategy to deal with all aspects of the life cycle from youth through to adults has never been more important, as you saw from the adult strategy. Here we're showing some of the differences that do exist. Whilst growth in Waterloo sort of slowed a little bit over the period just as a whole, you can see some of the gains there in and around where the primary site is that we think is ripe for consolidation of of these uses, and you can see there the increase in population. That's permanent population, so it's not student population, for example, it's residents, and you can see it's fairly considerable in that central area. As a result of that and the broad research that was undertaken, the Memorial Recreation Complex was identified as the most significant and likely opportunity to meet the needs of all citizens of the city in terms of general recreation, but also the needs of the older adult cohort as well. We did look at some other sites, including the existing ARC site itself, as well as other sites within Uptown. So our primary recommendation coming out of this is that, based on the consideration of a broad sweep of considerations, relocate the programming from the ARC and the Wing to an expanded WMRC. There are a number of questions that fall out of that if it was to proceed to a feasibility assessment, which is the next phase. But in terms of why that is the conclusion, I've mentioned best practice. We're looking at the centrality of that location. Community need drew us to that. And then, importantly, operating efficiencies, the ability to co-locate, get multi-purpose space, and reap the savings of that. But one other thing as well is that the active adult cohort, really starts at 50, 55. It's very difficult to definitionally describe a group that is so large, and so we want to make sure that we are providing a range of services, and so mixing recreation with the more specific needs of the older population group is central to this. Very quickly, the next series of slides is going to show you a range of spaces that have been conceptualized based on need, and it's based on those two aspects, general recreation and the older adult recreation needs. So to go through relatively quickly, there are a number of spaces, all of which have the potential for multi-use, but activity rooms, recreation, exercise classes, yoga, ballet, those kinds of things that you would expect to find in a community center, whether it be a Rim Park or WMRC or elsewhere. Flexible program opportunities so that the continued success with the Lynn-funded programs can continue to occur. One of the primary spaces is what we're calling a multi-purpose activity court. That's sort of a gymnasium, but not quite. It's much more flexible than that. Secondary walking track, we've looked at some of the limitations of trying to use the existing track in the WMRC, and so we're looking at a secondary space. A flexible community hall space for events, particularly special events, and then the requirements for innovations around storage and reflecting some of the changing nature of the community for washrooms, change rooms. That's certainly true as it relates to the swimming pool and other spaces. Kitchen, flexible dining space, so all of the programs that are currently occurring at the ARC continue to occur, but they do so in a better complex of spaces that offer the potential for doing more and better things as well. Very important in our view, and if my colleague from Perkins & Will were here, they would begin to articulate why this is important. But whilst placing the ARC and Wing within a consolidation of the WMRC, the importance is to still provide a sense of dedication of the space. So gathering space for older adults, separate entrance and reception area to meet the opportunities for socialize and gathering, separate and apart from the activities that might occur elsewhere in the facility, but doesn't preclude access to the entire facility as well. And some other spaces there. The administration office space, the hope is that there will be considerable improvement to the ability of staff to function in a new building. Guiding principles as we go forward, it's really all about accommodation of evolving programs, the importance of social spaces. The current ARC building is quite deficient in terms of its ability to enable that. Wing 404 less so. That's a better space, but still has its limitations. The centrality of this site provides for access. And then, of course, this is going to be a 40, 50-year build, and so the overall experience and identity of the space is going to be crucial. The next steps going forward are to look at feasibility, to balance those needs and functional spaces against what we think is achievable vis-a-vis capital costs and operational realities. And with that, I will draw to a close and be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of Council? Council Whaley?
That was a very interesting presentation. Waterloo's always only had a finite amount of recreation dollars. When I was a kid, almost all we were part of the boomer generation, and almost all the money was spent on kids' recreation. We built baseball fields and soccer fields and arenas and swimming pools for the kids, and that's how we spent our money. Lo and behold, all those young little boomers were running around and grew up in Waterloo and became a little older in Waterloo, and here we are now, the largest cohort again, and this time is seniors. And my worry is we might make the same mistake that we did when we did it before, and we gave that largest cohort all the recreation money. And I sense from what I heard in this presentation that that's likely to happen again, that the limited amount of recreation money we get is targeted for seniors, being the other cohorts, and that adult opportunities for recreation are somewhat limited. Are they going to be left out yet again? And is all the money going to follow the baby boomers? I won't mind because I have been one, but are we going to end up with the lion's share of all the resources yet again?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think my emphasising just the newsworthy items from last week on the release of the age and sex data from StatsCan may have sort of gave the impression that we are focusing more than we might otherwise on the 65 and above cohort, and that's really not the case. The step we started off with that first slide is it's really two elements. The aim here is to recognize that there is the need to fund general recreation. If you look at our report, to make the mistake of thinking that it's black and white, and so the focus in the next stage will be on the feasibility of creating multi-use space that at one point in the day can be used by children and younger adults, and then later in the day can be used by seniors or vice versa. That's going to be the hope that we can create some efficiency of space, as opposed to keeping these buildings separate, which is certainly likely to increase the dollars spent on both elements of the exercise.
Report, there was a hard cap on money. I think it's 10.7 or 10.3. I'm not sure just which one. I'm not trivializing. And that we might determine that it's money well spent to spend more on this kind of recreation dollars and less on people who don't want to recreate and may end up in hospitals or infirm. Beth.
Through you, Chair, the 10.7 you're referring to in the report is development charge funding that's coming online in 2020, and that's specifically to respond to community growth. So that is that component of the project. The funding for replacement of the older adult centers would come from disposition of ARC and or wing and other analysis that we still need to do.
So 10.7 is a minimum.
10.7 is what is budgeted in the long-term capital plan for 2020.
Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for answering some of my questions earlier, Beth. Walking track, that's something that I know when I talk to the different users, certainly from the older adults who want to use it and keep in shape all months of the year, that's very important. But also track and field, it's when I talk to them, it's their only place to really practice, and we have conflicts there. And I see that the goal is to actually have a conflict-free solution to this. Does that mean 2 walking tracks, or what did that really mean?
Yes, I mean, we started out with the idea of really understanding what that level of conflict is. I mean, it's a great track, and it's well used, and we've tracked that utilization of it. And what we originally thought, and this is why architects are so helpful, is that we thought maybe you could just take a row of seats out and just build a lower walking track. But the way exits and entries work in those kinds of buildings is it's not that easy. So you can't have a track inside another track, for example. So what that boils down to is that we really have no choice but to consider a secondary walking track. And that's in recognition of, A, the opportunity for it, and the demand for it, and the range of conflicts. So the new expanded building will try and establish different design options for a walking track.
Excellent.
Likely above the existing spaces, so an elevated track.
Thank you. And then on engagement with our existing users. So the users of the ARC and the users of the Wing 404, I can tell you're very, very passionate users and like being kept up to date.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to keep them up to date, to keep them in the loop on what's going on, to make sure that people know that there's a nice stepwise refinement to a solution for better older adult recreation?
We have been collecting any email addresses from anyone who's attended our consultation, answered a survey, and interested in getting updates. So email update went out advising residents about this meeting tonight. Our staff are also connecting with our customers, whether face-to-face or by email. We've contacted all of our affiliated groups to let them know about the project and how it's moving forward. And whenever we're putting something up on Engage Waterloo, anyone that's registered for that process, that platform would also get a notification. So that's how we've been keeping in the loop. And my phone is ringing regularly with folks that are quite interested to talk about this. And so there's many ways to get in touch with us. We also have a page on the city website where we're regularly updating information there and how people can get in touch with me to find out more information, ask questions as well.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to delegations then. And our first delegation is now the 2017 Senior of the Year, Rick Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My grandson, who's just here, 7 years old, he said, "You're Senior of the Year. Does that make you the oldest person in Waterloo?" Just feels like it. It's well, thank you very much, council members and guests. As you know, I'm Rick Chambers. I was the past chair of the 55 Plus Advisory Board, and now I'm on the on the Mayor's Advisory Committee for an age-friendly city. And I'd like to talk a little bit tonight about that lens and how this will affect this report and where we go from here. This is an excellent report, and I highly recommend, if you haven't read it yet, or no offense, Mr. Hack, but if you're having trouble sleeping some night, it's a great thing to get out there. One of the things my grandson also said, he just turned 7, he has a lot of fun facts, right? And this thing is full of fun facts, and I'm sure you'll be able to use these at parties. One of the things when I was in the accreditation business, we used to talk about separating the interesting from the useful information. For instance, Beth and my daughter were both at WCI at the same time, and they were good friends. And I taught at Grand River Collegiate with her dad, and he taught math and computers, and I taught English, so we didn't have much to talk about. But we have remained close ever since. So that's interesting, but it's not all that useful. I'd like to talk about useful things here. And as the report indicates, the ARC and the Wing 404 were both built in 1975, and they in a way have outlived their usefulness in many ways. So that if you look at all the new research, and certainly what is cited in this report, is that we're looking at multi-generational centers for people of all ages to work together, and this certainly does that in this example. But the other thing is that as a age-friendly city, and we are committed to age-friendliness, part of the World Health Organization team, there are certain things that I think we need to consider as we move forward with this report. One of the things that the age-friendly mandate says that it encourages active aging by optimizing opportunities for health, participation, and security in order to enhance quality of life as people age. So we've had a report in 2013, which is cited in here, and it talks about where we are in that. The age friendliness domains, there are 8 of them, and as Dr. John Lewis, who is on our team, points out, there are 3 hard ones, right? The tangible ones. There's housing, there's transportation, and there are buildings and public spaces. You can see those, touch those. But then there are the 5 not so tangible ones, which are social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and engagement, communication and information, and community support and health services. All of those need to be addressed when we talk about a new older adult center, not just the bricks and mortar that we might be putting together. The report very clearly outlines the advantages of moving to one center, and I won't repeat what John has already said. But the fun facts here about this older generation, as the census last week pointed out, that those of us over 65 now outnumber those people who are under 15. In this city, in 2011, 23.8% of the population was over 55 years old. By 2036, that will be 35%. 35% of this city in 2036 will be over 65 years old. That means that at this point, which is a really good point, to begin working on facilities for that group of people who will still be here. If you look at the 2013 age-friendly report that was done here, older people like living in Waterloo. It has a lot to offer, and that's one of the things that we want to support in this. So anyway, this report, as John's pointed out, covers a lot of bases here. One of the, as my grandson would say, fun facts here is that the activities that adults engage in across the country, and I had no idea, the top 3 are walking, gardening, and home exercise. So if we want people to engage in an active lifestyle to promote their long lives, then we need to provide areas for them to do that. I was interested when you look at the public consultation, one of their recommendations is a garden at this new location so that people can be actively engaged outside who are living in high-rise developments. The other thing that was touched on earlier was the identity of this location and of this facility. Even though it's going to be multi-generational, it will have an older adult component to it. The people right now who use the ARC and the Wing 404 love the space, they love going there to be with each other, and they love the identity that's part of that. Any new facility must have the same kind of identity. So if you walk into the seniors' homes, the new ones that are being built in Waterloo, they have these warm entry areas with seating and carpeting and lovely chairs and whatnot. We need to replicate that kind of thing in any new older adult center. Now, let me get to the heart of the matter here. One of the recommendations of this report is that we continue, or that the city continues to negotiate with Grand River Transit about a closer bus service to the Waterloo Rec Center. Currently, there is no bus service on Father David Bauer Drive, and if that's where the new older adult center is going to be, then we need to have some kind of bus service along that road. One of the things that the age-friendly information points out is that transportation recommendations, and this includes respect and social inclusion and social participation and all those other things, all city areas and services are accessible by public transit. Transport stops and stations are conveniently located. Public transportation is reliable and frequent. Now, the report points out that the GRT says that there is a bus stop on Herb Street at Avondale. Now, if you're going up Herb Street on that bus, you can't even see the rec center from there. On top of that is 350 meters from that bus stop to the rec center. In the report, they point out 3 well-known, or at least 3 other centers across the country that we should look at, perhaps. One's Regent Park Center in Toronto. The closest bus stop there is 180 meters away. The Chuck Bailey Rec Center in Surrey, BC. The SkyTrain is only 250 meters away. The Queen Elizabeth Park Community Center in Oakville, the bus stop is only 220 meters away. The Seagram Ion stop here is 600 meters away. The Willis Way Caroline Street stop is 1.3 kilometers away. I think at this point we need to not just negotiate with Grand River Transit for some kind of access from Herb Street down to the rec center. We need a bus route on Father David Bauer Drive. As mentioned earlier, when I was working with the 55 Plus Advisory Board, we and the student governments from the two universities approached Grand River Transit about a bus route that would go from the Ion stops in Uptown Waterloo, down Father David Bauer, across Westmount, and then back to the universities. The interesting thing was Grand River Transit didn't say no. And I take that as a positive, that if we continue to pressure them, I understand their perspective that they won't institute a new route until they see the whites of the eyes of the people who are going to ride it. On the other hand, I think as a going forward idea, we should not give up on that and keep pushing that notion of that route. Anyway, finally, just let me say, I think this is a great idea. I think that this will serve the city well. And one of the things that a guy who's quoted a lot, Bernard Isaacs, a well-known UK professor of geriatric medicine, he said, design for the young and you exclude the old, design for the old and you include everyone. Thank you.
Would you like to ask a question of the delegation, or? Okay, comment, please.
So to Rick, thank you very much. Continued applause for you. Great going. On the bus stop issue, since I also am a regional councillor, one of the things I think that we need to look at, both from a design standpoint, that if we put if the addition that might contain older adult recreation is actually a new entrance, and I'll maybe defer to Beth a bit, on the back side, even if there was a bus on Father David Bauer Drive, it would be almost equidistant whether you're walking from Herb Street, because our building is so long there, right? It's about a 300-meter walk from Father David Bauer Drive to that entrance, or a 340-meter walk from Herb Street, because it's actually 11 houses down. And it is, so even if there was a bus on Father David Bauer Drive, it would be, it'd still be like 300 meters. So the other thing that we're looking at, certainly from the Grand River Transit fellows, and the way that, because I keep on top of the reason why they didn't say no, they're doing a lot of work, as you know, redoing the east-west corridor to feed into the LRT. And with all those changes underway, targeted for September 2017 or January 2018, there'll be there's a lot on the go, right? So then they'll be able to see what might work for either Father David Bauer Drive or an increased access to Herb Street. But I think even right now, and maybe this will be my question to Beth, I think there's something in there that we are actually looking for, at least some improvements to the Herb Street access, since that is a reality today, and we do have a rec center there today.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we've had discussions with Grand River Transit, and they have agreed to work with the city and potentially provide financial support to make the access from Herb Street down either of the two streets closest to the bus stop more pedestrian friendly, which would also, we'd also be looking for sort of a crosswalk across the street to make both sides of the street more accessible to the facility. And so our staff can work with them, with council's direction, to move that forward within the next year or so.
And I would hope that we're also looking at other solutions. For example, there's Bus Plus, which is something, a small bus from the region that would be more like a shuttle type service that actually might be more convenient, because it could potentially go to door or LRT stop to LRT stop, those kinds of options as well.
Certainly, we have our own transportation program in the senior services unit that provides transportation to and from our centers, which someone that may not be able to navigate public transit could access. And there's Mobility Plus as well. So we can continue having discussions about how to ensure that the rec center site is accessible for everyone that wants to be part of that facility.
Yeah. So lots of irons in the fire, and hopefully we do want transit service for that site. That's for sure.
All right, we have a recommendation in front of us. Would anyone like to move it? Councillor Whaley? I'm going to go to this side. Councillor Burke seconds it. Any comments? Well, I'm going to comment because I have to say, first of all, reading the report, which was an incredible report, and I do agree with you, Mr. Chambers, there's a lot of really interesting fun facts in there, especially as an uptown councillor. But I couldn't help but get really excited about this because it is such an amazing combination, I think, of being able to plan something and plan it well, plan it with the community involved with it, and continue to, engage everyone as we move along. But I think this is going to be such an amazing step forward for the city of Waterloo, and I'm just excited to be a part of this. Yes, Beth.
I think the project team, pending council's approval tonight to move forward to feasibility study, is really excited as well. We know that the community is really passionate about our recreation centers and was very passionate at the consultation sessions. And so we're hoping that going to the next stage when we start seeing conceptual drawings and schematic drawings, that will help the community understand the potential of this project, to see what it might actually look like, how the buildings would be connected, how you can move from space to space, the flexibility of spaces and the new opportunities that they would provide. So we're really looking forward to the next steps as well.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who came out tonight to be a part of this. Bye-bye, Mr. Chambers, Senior of the Year. All right, I guess I'll just pause for a minute as everyone, we're going to see some movement of chairs here as some people move out, and I believe we'll have some others move in for the informal public hearing. So we'll begin the informal public meeting to consider official plan amendment number 16 and zoning bylaw amendment Z1706 ODC Tooling and Mold, which is the Ontario Dye Company Limited, 93 to 119 Rogers Street. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application and a staff report that will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future time. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs the registry at the back will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaws, should sign the appropriate registry, which we just talked about. If there's more than one registry, no, I think we only have one tonight. So now we're going to move on to the planner. Maybe we could close the door at the back. Sam's doing it. Awesome. Thank you. So the planner is going to do a presentation from the podium on this. Thank you very much. Take it away.
An informal meeting, public meeting for two site-specific applications received by the City of Waterloo for 93 to 119 Rogers Street. The applications that are before us are Official Plan Amendment 16 and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Z1706. The subject site is located on the southwest corner of Rogers Street and Moore Avenue. In the City of Waterloo, and it's close to both uptown Waterloo as well as downtown Kitchener. There are a number of employers that are within walking distance to the site, including the Grand River Hospital, Sun Life Financial, as well as a cluster of commercial and office uses located at the corner of Rogers Street and Weber Street. As well, there's Communitech, Google, and the offices at the Tannery that are also within about 15-minute walk. Immediately to the south of the property is the shared boundary between the cities of Kitchener and Waterloo, and south of that again is the Mount Hope Cemetery, which occupies at about 11 hectares. The cemetery also wraps around and is located on the west side of the property. To the north of the property is, and sort of the blue line, is the Spur Line Trail, which offers opportunities for active transportation as well as pedestrian connection to both Uptown Waterloo as well as the multimodal hub in the City of Kitchener. And to the south and west of the property, again that blue line, is the Iron Horse Trail. Offers the same types of amenities reaching into the west side of Uptown and further onto the Waterloo Park and beyond. The site is also in close proximity to several bus routes, with the buses running along King Street, King Street, Union Street, and Weber, and is located within the Grand River Station area as shown in the City of Kitchener's station area planning or parts, and is also within walking distance to the Allen Street station at Allen and King. A closer look at the property, it consists of 8 municipal properties, which total in about 2 hectares. Of that, 1.48 hectares is occupied by the Ontario Dye Company, or ODC, and the remaining lands are occupied by single detached dwellings with exception to one, which is a triplex. The property has about 158 meters of frontage along Rogers Street and 131 meters of frontage along Moore Ave. And this aerial photograph captures the broader Mary Allen neighborhood, and the surrounding land use is predominantly low-rise, single-detached dwellings. There are a few apartment buildings that can be seen by this image. They're located mainly on Lucan Street, Union, Mary, and King Streets, and those apartment buildings range in height from about 3 to 10 stories. In terms of the current planning framework, the lands are designated low-density residential in the city's official plan, which provides for a maximum density of about 150 bedrooms per hectare, as well as a maximum height of 10 meters. The designation permits a mix of low density, which includes housing forms such as singles, semis, duplexes and triplexes, townhouses, and terrace dwellings. I also wanted to point out that a portion of the property at 119 Rogers Street, or the ODC site, is also designated industrial transitional area, and the corresponding official plan policies allow for or envision that this property would be accommodating some different type of use in the future, of which would be a mixed use and a higher density, and sensitive uses would be a permitted use, which includes residential. And Moore Avenue is a minor collector. In terms of the zoning, the lands are zoned General Residence 1, which applies to 93 to 111 Roger Street, or the houses that front onto Roger. And the ODC site, or 119 Roger, is Industrial 1. The General Residence 1 provides for, again, a low-density type of development in the form of single-detached, semi-detached duplexes and triplexes. And the industrial, of course, is more of an industrial use. In terms of the proposed bylaw, which is out for circulation currently, the lands that, again, fronting onto Rogers Street that contain these single-detached dwellings are zoned residential 4, which again provides for very similar uses as what is permitted today. And the industrial property is zoned future determination, again, in order to conform with the official plan and the visioning piece in terms of transitioning to something else. The applicant has indicated that there are a number of development options that would be suitable for this property. And in order to illustrate that, the applications would translate on the ground. This concept plan has been provided. The concept plan consists of 60 stacked townhouses that are close to the intersection of Roger Street and Moore Ave, and 4 apartment buildings that are currently along the westerly and southerly boundaries of the property. The apartment building closest to Rogers Street would be a height of about 3 stories, with the remaining 3 buildings to be a height of 6 stories. There is also ground floor commercial and office uses that are proposed, approximately 930 square meters in total. and those are to be contained within the units that are fronting onto Roger Street and Moore Street. The uses that are proposed include personal service, coffee shops, retail, office, and medical clinics. There's approximately 325 parking spaces that are to be accommodated on the site at grade in a structured unit within the apartment buildings as well as underground. And vehicular access is proposed from and to and from Roger Street and Moore Avenue. There is also an informal pedestrian pathway that currently exists in the southwest corner of the property, and through this application, the applicant would be looking to formalize that pedestrian connection. In the concept plan, in terms of the height and density, would translate into a maximum density of about 300 bedrooms per hectare, which would be a total of approximately 630 bedrooms in total. A maximum of 300 dwelling units, a maximum height of 12 meters within the first 55 meters of Roger Street, and with the remainder of the site to be a maximum of 20 meters. To facilitate this development, the applicant is proposing to redesignate the lands from low-density residential to a mixed-use, medium-density residential. And the mixed use does afford for a maximum of 450 bedrooms per hectare and a height of 20 meters. However, the applicant is wishing to cap the density at 300 bedrooms per hectare and a maximum, again, height of that 12 meters within the first 55 meters of Roger Street. A corresponding zoning bylaw amendment is also proposed, which would rezone the lands from Industrial 1 and General Residence 1 to holding multiple residence 6 with site-specific provisions, which include the permission to construct townhouses and stacked townhouses, to provide for the ancillary commercial and or office uses within the dwellings. Again, that maximum density of 300 bedrooms per hectare and a total of 300 units. The height maximum of 12 meters within the first 55 meters off along Roger Street and then 20 on the remainder. A reduced parking rate of 1.05 spaces per unit and 1 space for every 100 square meters of commercial space. And then holding provision, or an H symbol, to be applied in order to require a record of site condition to be filed with the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. The applicant has submitted a number of studies and plans with the application, which are currently circulating and being reviewed by staff. And while we will be looking at the full range of planning issues, I've highlighted a few here which we will be paying particular attention to. Those include the density and the dwelling type, to ensure that we are getting the right balance on this site, parkland dedication, and again, as I mentioned, that record of site condition, and any other issues that are identified through the public consultation process. In terms of next steps, following the informal public meeting, staff will, as I say, finish off that evaluation and prepare a report with recommendations that will be presented at a formal public meeting for Council's consideration. If supported by Council, then an implementing bylaw would be passed, along with the official plan amendment, which would be forwarded on to the region of Waterloo as the delegated approval authority. That doesn't necessarily allow for the development. I just highlighted a few other approvals that would be required before development is to occur on this property. And as I mentioned, that the official plan amendment would be forwarded to the region for final approval. The applicant would also have to lift the holding provision, would also have to apply for obtain site plan approval, and then finally issuance of any building permits. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does any councillor have any questions for staff? And please remember, this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification, Councillor Whaley, may be asked. Council members should not express opinions at this point. Councillor Whaley, go ahead.
Shame on me. Good presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first relates to the stacked townhouses. Is it the intention for the stacked townhouses to have commercial on the first floor, a live and workspace type of environment like we see on Father David Bauer Drive?
Yes, that is
Same
correct.
idea.
Yes, and it would be restricted to that main floor.
The current building on site, the main building on site, is an old era industrial factory dating back, I guess, about 80 years. And I wonder if you know if there's any noise or vibrations or odor that emanate from the building at the present time.
Well, a noise study has been completed for the property. They have not necessarily, what it's doing is it looked at off-site noise sources in terms of what the proposal might bring onto it and what the impacts might be. The current use would be required to operate under an environmental compliance with the ministry, so if there was any noise and or odor, it would be covered off by that compliance.
I was interested in your idea that this factory has transitional zoning. So is it intention of this transitional zoning for the city to understand that this building is likely to change over in the near future to some other use, and that's why the transitional label applies and it doesn't continue to be in industrial classification?
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. It provides for consideration of a transition. So while it recognizes that there are certain pockets within the city that are lower density or are surrounded by residential, the official plan provides for a different type of use in the long term. So consideration of that use.
Councillor Freeman?
Through you, Chair Gerald, can I trouble you, Wendy, to go back to your slide where you show the two zoning pieces? So I want to make sure I understand, the transitional zoning is from the comprehensive bylaw review, or is it from the current bylaw?
The industrial transitional area, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, is actually an official plan designation.
Okay, so it's in the OP, and it hasn't been written into the comprehensive bylaw review at this time, but that's the intention.
Correct.
Okay, so under the low density residential, you've listed here maximum height 10 meters. So I was trying to get a sense, are those stacked towns that are surrounding the edge of the property, do they meet the intent of that LDR?
They would, through you, Madam Chair, they would exceed the maximum height requirements. As noted, the LDR does provide for a version of townhouses, but not necessarily the height at which is being requested.
So I was having troubles in your site plan seeing what the height was. What is it, 3 stories for the stacked towns, or I saw that you had 6 stories listed on one side and 2 and 3 stories. So on these ones, I was having a hard time understanding. Are they a 2 double stacked, triple stacked?
I think there is flexibility to determine what the ultimate height would be. It's just to allow for that maximum height of 12 meters. And perhaps it is, Mr. Shields is here from representing the applicant. It may be something that he may be able to shed a little bit more light in terms of what the ultimate product is anticipated.
And then the setback requirements from the front, rear, and side yards, do they meet the zoning intent of the original zoning, the low density residential zoning, or are they? Is there variances requested of those as well, or did I just miss that?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it does meet the intent.
All right. Seeing no more questions, we are going to move on to delegations here. I will now ask any registered delegations to come forward. And I have currently 4 on my list at 10 minutes. So you'll just provide your name and the city that you live in. And we'll begin with Glenn Shields and Matthew Warjak, please. Warjak.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of committee. I'm Glenn Shields with the GSP Group, and we're planning consultants on this project. I'm here tonight as well with Mr. Ron Levine from ODC, and I'll run through a short presentation, turn over to Ron as well for some concluding remarks. As Wendy indicated, I'm not going to repeat all of that. The site is about 2 hectares in size, located at the corner of Roger and Moore Street, excuse me, and in certainly an established residential neighborhood, but one that's really centrally located in the city, and as well right next to the Mount Hope Cemetery. This slide is similar to what Wendy showed, but it really highlights, I think, the centrality of the site and all of the various community facilities, schools, hospital, employment activities, commercial activities, as well as transportation routes, including surface transit buses, the new ION, and a couple of great trails that are all located very close to this site. So it really is well located to support residents who live here, but also to add support to those community facilities as well, like the Elizabeth Ziegler School. So, and I think given that location too, this site will probably attract a wide range of people looking to live in this new neighborhood. In terms of the official plan, Wendy indicated the change that's being requested, and we're looking to move from a low-density residential to a mixed-use medium-density residential. That category in the official plan provides for development of up to 450 bedrooms per hectare. This request is to take it only to 300 bedrooms per hectare, so if you will, it's halfway between the upper limit of the low-density residential and the upper limit of the medium-density residential. There is a provision in that designation as well for commercial facilities, and we're proposing in the zoning bylaw to provide for a range of commercial facilities so that if there is a market and a demand for those to be located on the ground floor along Roger and Moore Street as well. So those would likely be perhaps live-work, as was indicated by Councillor, or some other local serving commercial uses that would support not only people living in there, but people in the neighborhood as well. And as well, we're proposing to place some height restrictions on the site, primarily in the vicinity of Roger and Moore, the 2 frontages, so we can have a compatible relationship with the built form and the type of housing that's in the neighborhood. Again, with respect to the zoning bylaw, an amendment there too to the MR6 zone, but also with those special regulations in place in order to provide some more detailed guidance with respect to the design and especially with respect to the height along Moore and Roger Street, and then stepping back and having the taller buildings at the back of the site towards the Mount Hope Cemetery. The commercial uses, as I indicated, you can see a range of them there. They would all be, smaller scale and local serving, and those would be on the ground floor of, again, of the buildings fronting those 2 streets, should there be a demand. We're also requesting a change to the parking regulations for the MR zone to have a minimum parking rate of 1.05 spaces per unit, which is a rate that the city is looking at applying elsewhere in or at sites that are in close proximity to the new ION LRT system. And this site is very close to that new station that's being developed at the Grand River Hospital. We're about 350 meters away, so a very short and convenient walk from the site. The concept that is part of the support for the application, as Wendy indicated, shows a range of multi-unit housing types. This particular concept has stacked townhouse units along Roger and Moore, and then mid-rise apartments towards the back at up to 6 stories in height, as per the MR6 zone. The units along Roger and along Moore, in response to Councillor Freeman's question, would be in the order of 2, 3, or 4 stories in height. If a 12-meter height was permitted on site, that would provide for up to 4 stories. This demonstration plan shows 3-story stacked townhouse units, so a single floor on top of 2 floors. But we certainly believe that, again, the site, given its location and given its size and dimensions, can support a range of townhouse forms and low-rise apartment-type forms as well. This is an aerial view of a demonstration model. Again, on the right-hand side is Roger, and in the foreground, running east-west in this sketch, is Moore. We have the more compact buildings along those 2 streets, and then the apartment form at the back of the site towards the Mount Hope Cemetery. There'll also be some green space, of course, on site. Exactly how that's configured and where it's configured, we'll certainly work through when the actual built form is determined, the type of units, and through that site plan approval process. So we're still a long way away, but there'll certainly be on-site recreational facilities as well. These 2 sketches show our intent on the left-hand side along Roger Street and also along Moore Street to have townhouse forms up towards the street, but to have parking areas and garages at the back of the units so that we create a very attractive streetscape and it's not broken up by driveways and garages. The cars are at the back, and that creates a nice place to walk. And it also allows us to maximize on-street parking as well for visitors. The sketch on the right shows open space possibilities, and again, there'll be opportunity to provide some space on site for the residents in the project. These are sections through the site. The bottom section runs from Roger Street on the left-hand side. It shows the existing 2.5-story built form along there with the apartment buildings back in behind. So we have a low-rise 3-story building shown here out towards Roger, and then stepping back to the taller buildings as we go further into the site. The top sketch is a view looking at the corner of Roger and Moore. So we see in the foreground the stacked townhouse units, and then back in behind the apartment units. So again, that notion of transition in scale and height from the street edges back into the site. The technical studies have been completed, and they've been submitted now to the city and regional staff for review. Functional servicing report was prepared, and there is capacity to accommodate all of the utilities on the site. We did a stationary noise assessment as well, and that was going forward, so to ensure that there was no noise sources that created any adverse effect on the new units. And we did hydro-G and source water study for the region, and that confirmed that we have a long way down to the groundwater table here, so we're not going to have any issues with our foundations and underground works. We held a neighborhood meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we had a great turnout of people in the neighborhood, and we wanted to inform them about the project and start that conversation and discussion. Obviously, there were some people who were concerned about traffic impact of this project on the neighborhood. And we do have a study that was submitted and now being reviewed by city staff. The conclusions are outlined here. It's interesting to note, though, too, that this is not a vacant property. There is an ongoing operation on the property right now. There's about 100 people that work there, and we do have traffic coming and going. So in terms of the incremental change, we're looking at about 80 new weekday peak hour trips relative to what's there today. Key thing in these traffic studies, of course, is to look at the intersections in the area. And both the unsignalized Roger and Moore intersection as well as the Union and Moore intersection were tested, and they can accommodate the traffic that's generated from this site, as well as factoring in the background traffic growth that's going to happen in the area. The level of service, which the transportation analysts use as a marker or guidance, has both of these intersections at level of service B or A, so they're at the higher end of service provision. As well, the traffic study provided rationale as well for our parking rate of 1.05, and acknowledge that that's an appropriate rate for this location, given its accessibility to so many other modes of travel, and especially given its location proximity to the new LRT system. So, in conclusion, the site is certainly part of that industrial transition that was noted in the city's official plan. ODC has been at the site for a long time, and Ron will provide some background on that, but the city has anticipated this change for some time, and it certainly is an isolated site, industrial site, surrounded by residential development. But it's a great place for redevelopment and for intensive, or more intensive form of development, I should say. It's what we're trying to accomplish is a low-rise form that fits within the neighborhood, and try to promote that integration and compatibility with that neighborhood. We're certainly well located here with all those services and facilities in the area, and especially from a transportation perspective, close to a lot of different modes of travel as well. The site-specific official plan and zoning bylaw amendments that have been requested will provide guidance in terms of the form and the direction on density and height. And again, it is an increase over the low-density residential, but it's not proposing to take it to the maximum provisions of the medium-density residential designation. So we think it's a very good infill project, and now going to be assessed, obviously, and we'll be back hopefully in the fall with some recommendations and looking for an approval. Ron, maybe you could.
Okay. Madam Chair, Councillors, Your Worship, City staff, and fellow citizens, my name is Ron Levine. I'm the owner of Ontario Dye Company and the properties in question. My grandfather bought this property in 1945, and at the time it was farmland. It was outside the core of Waterloo, of the cities. It was in between Kitchener and Waterloo. There was a barn in the back, so I'm told. I wasn't there at the time. There were a few farmhouses in the area. He built his factory there in 1948, and we are still using that site today for manufacturing. Over the last 69 years, the city has grown around our site. We have outgrown our building in size, in terms of size and efficiency, and I've made the decision, based on our family legacy in history in Waterloo, and recognizing that my 95 employees live in the city of Waterloo or nearby, I made the decision to maintain manufacturing in Waterloo. So I'm pleased to report to Council today that last week we started construction on our new engineering and manufacturing facility on Randall Drive in North Waterloo. Once that building is complete, we'll be moving our entire operation from Roger Street into that building. This is a huge milestone in the history of our company. So that leaves in question, what about the property on Roger Street? It's very important to me to see that this property goes to good use. So I hired GSP Group and Robertson Simmons Architects to develop a concept plan. And I think they've done a great job in their plan. They've balanced the need for intensification in the core of the city, balanced with an aesthetically pleasing plan. They have incorporated open spaces, walking paths, and gathering areas within the plan. And I believe they've created a great, high quality, highly functional plan with these spaces. This property that we're talking about, it's a unique property. Nowhere else in the region do we have 5 acres of future residential development land in the core of Waterloo. With its proximity to the LRT, to walking trails, to employment, and to uptown. This is a great neighborhood. I've spent most of my, well, up until now, most of my working career in this neighborhood. And I want to see this land be developed in such a way that it blends in well with the neighborhood, yet takes advantage of its size and its proximity to the core of the city. This property would attract a wide demographics of families, including which would support local schools such as Elizabeth Ziegler and KCI. It would also support local businesses within the area. This is a really exciting project for our family, for my family. And this, I see this as the possibility of carrying on our family legacy, because this property will always be remembered as Ontario Dye Company. So thank you. I'm willing to answer any questions, either now or afterwards. If there are any additional questions, I will be here.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. There are a few councillors that would like to ask some questions. I have Councillor Freeman up first.
Through you, Chair Durrell, either for you, Ron, or for Mr. Shields. So I noticed that along Moore, I think it's Moore, if you could bring back up that drawing that shows the massing. And I wasn't sure too whether these massing drawings are complete. I just see a really beautiful pedestrian realm that you've created along Moore en route to towards the cemetery and green space, and then that's interrupted by the entrance to the parking garage. So I just wondered whether you'd given any consideration to the facades that face onto Moore and onto Roger Street so that they were more in keeping with the residential look and feel and the pedestrian realm creation along that side.
I think we've got a good scale and mass here. The actual architectural treatment and expression, certainly something that we will be working on further. And when we get to the time of the site plan application, we'll certainly be focusing on those things.
So for clarity, the massing that's shown here is just simply for massing height, not architectural rendering at all.
Exactly. We haven't got to the point of dealing with the architectural expression. Yeah.
Councillor Whaley.
Well, first of all, Mr. Levine, thank you for keeping the jobs in Waterloo. We really appreciate it. Moving any industrial land to other use is hard for a council because industrial land means so much to us, and we're happy to see that you've found some other industrial land so that your long legacy in the community can continue to another generation and a generation after that. With respect to the building itself, the current building itself, you gave 2 reasons for your desire to move. One was that the building was too small for your current needs, and also that the building was antiquated.
Yes.
Is it your belief that that building, after 70 years of hard use as an industrial site, is worn out for that purpose?
That would be fair to say. The ceilings are very low. The products that we produced over the years have been very small. We've branched off into other industries such as the food packaging industry and automotive tooling industries that require higher ceilings, larger cranes to be able to maneuver larger tooling. Every time we want to bring a machine in, we have trouble finding where we can locate it within the building. We rely on investments in technology, and the new machinery that we're purchasing seems to be getting larger and larger. The tools that we're manufacturing are getting larger, so we're short of assembly space and manufacturing space. So I envision a building that will be very flexible. Large open ceilings, lots of crane capacity, which would give us the flexibility to develop products for the future. I don't know what we'll be building 5, 10, 20 years from now, so I'm trying to create a flexible building. And also taking into consideration our neighbors, we have had a lot of complaints over the years from noise from our building, noise from snow removal. We do contract snow removal, and typically they come in the middle of the night because our shift starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. We've had complaints from noise from our outside dust collectors, noise from radios when our employees would leave the doors open in the summer for fresh air. So yes, we have had a number of complaints. We've had complaints with trucks driving over our neighbor's property. Yeah. So we've tried to have a close amicable relationship with our neighbors, and I just think that for what we're doing, we would be more well-suited in an industrial area. Thank you for your question.
Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you very much, through the chair. On the corner of this diagram, it appears there's some sort of amenity space or community space there. Is that the intention of that for the corner area?
Yes, in this concept, that's right. We've got a green space at the corner, and it could be a nice little amenity space, place for people to meet in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And then if you could, Glenn, go to the slide that shows the grading of the land. It looks like the entry points into the underground parking. There, so I'm just looking at the grading of the land there. Is that the underground parking that I see there on the bottom right?
Yes.
Is that underground parking?
Yes, and if you see the site, the grade is shown there, and the site tapers from the corner of Roger and Moore back down about 4 meters as you go back down towards the cemetery. So there is a natural grade change there. So we're hoping to make use of that natural grade change in the design of the buildings.
Thank you, and thank you, Ron, for keeping your business in Waterloo.
Who's going to live here?
That's a good question. Obviously, nothing's being offered for sale yet or rent, so we don't know. I would think this is going to be appealing to a wide range of people because of its proximity. Wendy listed a number of facilities that were nearby, and you saw on that map as well, there was a lot of, going the wrong way, a lot of facilities nearby. What we're seeing in a lot of our other projects is a lot of people, younger people, young couples or single people who can't yet afford a detached house or maybe don't want a detached house are certainly active in the marketplace and looking at units like this. There are a lot of people living in established neighborhoods who like to stay in the neighborhood as they age, and we just heard in the last presentation about the changing demographics. This kind of housing is also very attractive to that demographic or that segment of our community. And then we've got in the middle, people with families as well, young families. And one of the key things, I live in an older neighborhood that has elementary schools, and there are a lot of younger people moving into our neighborhood, and that's probably the primary factor, is the schools. So being close to Elizabeth Ziegler School and being close to the high school and being close to the LRT to take you to the post-secondary education facilities we've got in town, I think will make this an interesting site and also, of interest to families as well.
You mentioned rental or condo. It hasn't been decided yet whether people can buy or not here?
No, those decisions still have to be made. Yeah.
Seeing no more questions, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have three more delegations. Carlton Simpson, please come up. Please state your name and the city you live in, please.
Yep. My name's Carl Simpson. I live in Waterloo. I actually live on Roger Street. So I have a real vested interest in this. I want to talk about, I think tonight is primarily about zoning applications. So I want to talk about the zoning application, but then I'll also talk about some of the details of the proposal. And because I'm speaking for myself, but also my partner and I have surveyed the neighborhood, so I'm familiar with a lot of people. But because you had a couple things going on tonight, could I just have a show of hands of people that have concerns about the proposal?
Oh, I'm sorry, this is not a
It's just because I'm
Please
sort
talk
of,
to
in a
us,
sense, I'm representing them.
Right, but
So-
I just want you to know that this is an informal hearing, and you're here to talk to the council, please.
Okay.
Thank you. All of those people who put up their hands have an opportunity to speak to us, but you're here to speak to us
Well,
alone, please.
not everybody
And let's
is comfortable
respect the
doing that,
process.
so.
Thank you.
So I'll turn to the first thing about zoning. The property in the official plan is not designated as either a node or a corridor. So it's not designated by what I take as the sort of the book that rules us, right, that guides our decisions. That's a product of citizen involvement. So there are areas in our neighborhood that are designated as nodes, corridors for higher intensification. This isn't one of them. So we've heard from the owner why they're moving. So it seems to me that the proposal for a zoning change is, I can think of two reasons why you might propose a zoning change. One is to maximize the selling price of the property. So if you're just going to turn around and sell it once you've moved, having it zoned for a higher density obviously increases the value of it. Another reason for asking for a zoning change might be to maximize the number of rental units or sale units if you intend to develop it yourself. I don't think it matters what the intention here is, whether it's to be the developer or to just sell the parcel if a zoning change comes through. But in either case, the owner really is maximizing their profit at the expense of the neighborhood. And expense both literally and in more nebulous ways. So, for instance, I live on Roger Street. MPAC has assured me that the value of my property will go down if there's an apartment building built on the street beside me. I had MPAC in my house a couple of weeks ago on a different matter, and this came up. So, yes, they've assured me that I can expect that. So there might be real financial costs to the rest of the neighborhood. I think that there are other costs as well. Speaking to people in the neighborhood, lots of people are concerned about the value of their homes, but they're also concerned about increased traffic, which we've seen somewhat addressed this evening. So increased traffic on not just the main streets, not just on Moore and Roger, but on the secondary streets. So there are lots of people who now will divert off Moore in order to avoid the speed bumps, right? So I think that a traffic study would need to be done for the whole neighborhood, not simply for Union and Moore and Roger and Moore. So that's one concern that I've heard from many people. Another is the visual appearance. So you've raised questions already about the height, the look of the streetscape. So a zoning change would allow them to increase the height because it's going to be townhouses in a neighborhood that is primarily single-family dwellings. You're going to have a facade of townhouse. So rather than a broken up sort of play between houses and lawns and sides of houses and trees, you'll just have this facade. And based on their concept plan, they've actually moved it forward of the line of houses on the street already. So it might actually fit within the limits, but the existing houses then would be set back. So they've moved it a little closer to the street. So the setback isn't what's there now. So you're just going to have it move forward, and it'll be this 3 or 4 story facade on the street. That doesn't fit with the neighborhood. That doesn't fit with the houses on the street, on either Roger or Moore, or the houses that are in the vicinity. So I don't think it fits in with the sort of the visual sense of the community. And this would result in a loss of green space. In part because the property under development, the ODC land, actually has a green space on it. And it is private property, but they've generously allowed the community to use it, so we feel a kind of, if not ownership, we would certainly feel a loss at the loss of that green space. So thinking about a zoning change, while this is a large chunk of land, and while it currently is industrial land, it is in a community neighborhood. Recently, the Mary Allen neighborhood, I like to say they annexed us, but they extended their range to include us in their neighborhood. So imagine if I bought 3 or 4 houses on the corner of Mary and Allen Street and then came to you and asked for a zoning change because I wanted to put up an apartment building. I think that would just be a non-starter. Right? So the fact that we are on the edge of the Mary Allen community, the fact that we are sort of orphaned on the south side of Union Street, squeezed between Union and the cemetery, I don't think should mean that we get any less consideration than any of the other old established communities in the neighborhood. Turning specifically to the proposal, so I've said there seems to be less of a setback. It may be within the bylaw, but the existing houses then are set back further than what the current bylaw says. So that will change the shape of the feel of the street. We'll have a loss of green space. We'll have a loss of an existing housing stock. There are 7 houses on Roger Street that they are proposing to tear down. 2 of those houses are 2 of 3 houses that are Berlin vernacular houses. That's our house, right? They're not fancy houses. They were worker houses, but they're a finite stock and they're in good shape. And so to tear down 2 of those houses seems like a shame. The other houses, they're, again, not grand houses, but they're in pretty good shape. And so the proposal is to eliminate some of our existing housing stock and replace it with something else, rather than take where there isn't housing already and propose building there. Again, the houses on the street are not grand houses, but imagine that I bought 4 or 5 houses on the corner of Mary Allen, sat on them for 10 years and let them run down until they weren't great houses. They're still good houses and they can be rejuvenated if the will is there. In the plan, I understand it's a concept plan, but you're being asked to make a decision based on a number of hypotheticals. So one of those is we simply don't know how these buildings are going to be built. In other words, what kind of design and engineering is going to go in them. So we don't know how they're going to be heated, how they're going to be cooled. We've got 4 apartment blocks that may or may not have air conditioners for each unit on the outside of them. That would be a massive amount of air conditioning going on. If you sit out in your own backyard and hear your neighbor's air conditioner, imagine 20 or 50 of those. And so we don't know if there's, the clock's behind me, so I don't know who planned that, but based on ODC's
2 minutes and
drawings-
14 seconds.
I've got 14 seconds. Oh, 2 minutes, okay. I can do this. So based on their drawings, the apartment building on Roger Street is actually, they talk about it as 3 stories, but it's a kind of nominal 3 stories. As you notice, there's parking underneath it. The ground slopes away from the street. At street level, in their diagram, they show existing houses, and you can see that the one house in front of the apartment building is dwarfed by it. So the apartment building at the front is really 3.5 stories, tapering down to 4.5 stories at the back. So to call it a 3-story apartment building isn't, I don't think, quite accurate, but regardless. Here's some of what I've picked up from discussions around the neighborhood. Townhouses, people generally aren't opposed to those. So the concept of a townhouse gets mild approval. The idea of a 2-story townhouse versus a 3- or 4-story townhouse gets much more approval because, again, it fits into the scale of the neighborhood. I haven't talked with anybody who's opposed to intensification, but this move is, I think, radical intensification. So scaling that down. the mention of the 4 apartment buildings, that's where you start to get an earful, right? The idea of 4 blocks, and I think their illustration, I'm glad they showed it, it's a massive amount of housing being plopped down in what is essentially a single family dwelling community, though with we have apartment buildings that mostly face onto or abut Union Street, right, which is designated already higher density, medium density zoning. More green space, perhaps with, and this fits nicely with the discussions earlier in the evening, integrated community gardens or green space for the residents. The underground parking is something that people find attractive. Forward-thinking design would probably get more support. Green design, solar power, being able to take the much smaller complex off the grid or partially off the grid, make it somewhat self-sustaining. I'll sum up. In the proposal, if I was a councillor, I see nothing there that would make me want to change the existing zoning. I think the existing zoning would allow for an intensification on that property that would use it well, that would integrate it nicely into the existing neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. No, we do not applaud. Just so everyone in the room, we appreciate that you're here. It's important that you're here, and we want to hear what you have to say. We do not allow applause in the council chambers because it can, Olga, help me with this, Madam Chair. Why do we not allow applause in here?
It takes up time.
No. In fact, it's so that everyone has a fair say. I mean, we want everyone to feel comfortable to speak in front of our delegation. It's a little scary sometimes, isn't it, Mr. Simpson? So now imagine if someone was coming up to speak on the other side. So we want to be respectful of everyone's views, and so we thank you for for what you've had to say, and we respect everyone for what their views and beliefs are within that neighborhood. So please, no more applause. I appreciate it if you would respect the council chambers. Does anybody have a question of Mr. Simpson? Please.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Simpson, through you, Chair Durrell. So what in your mind should go on this big piece of property that's in the middle of a residential neighborhood?
I think residential housing should go on it. I think I describe us as a somewhat orphaned neighborhood, so south of Union, between Union and the cemetery. We have no park space. The cemetery becomes our park. Conceivably 300 to 500, 450 people living in the proposed unit will make use of the cemetery for their park space. So I think some green space included in it. Housing that is more in keeping. I'm not opposed to intensification, so town housing, but housing that is more in keeping with the scale of the existing housing. The houses in that neighborhood are 2 stories or 1.5 story houses. So to propose 4-story long facade, I don't think fits.
I had one of the residents say the dead neighbors. So they have the living neighbors and the dead neighbors in the cemetery, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. The next delegation, question of staff from Mayor Jaworski. Sit down then. Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Okay.
It's more a question on your behalf, and thank you for the input, giving input to the applicant and to the city, to staff. The delegate mentioned nodes and corridors, which is more the larger size nodes and corridors, dates back to 2005. But really, we were talking about the official plan, and maybe you could talk about the consultation that went into the official plan and the time when it came into being, and some of the official plan thoughts about this area that is currently underway. Just to give clarity, so it's like rather than nodes and corridors from 2005, we're really talking about the official plan, which is probably 2011 timeframe.
Through you, Chair Durrell, to Mayor Jaworski. The official plan was adopted, it came into effect December 2012, so it's a fairly recent plan. It does talk about this property in terms of, as Ms. Fisher indicated, the existing single detached homes and the 1 triplex being designated as low-density residential and the existing industrial use being identified as an industrial transition area. The intention there is that the official plan envisioned that the industrial use would in the longer term, would no longer exist, and that the property would transition to an alternative land use. In this context, it makes sense to transition it towards residential. The exact nature and scope of that transition is yet to be determined. So the applications that are advanced to council are providing a vision. They have not been assessed with respect to the official plan. These lands are not within a particular node or a corridor. They are just designated as part of an existing established neighborhood.
Megan Piercy, please come up to the podium. Even though I just said your name, for the record, say your name and what city you live in, please.
My name is Megan Piercy. I live on Peltz Avenue, which means I'm in Kitchener, but my backyard neighbors are Waterloo. It's Graham Street.
Then you have to leave, I'm sorry. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Joke.
I live 1/2 a block from the corner of this land, so I'm part of the neighborhood.
More than welcome here.
I wanted to talk to the bigger picture of making, intelligent and well-informed and thought-through decisions about intensifying the more central parts of KW, all of it, rather than just making a one-time decision for just this land. As I've been talking with my neighbors, the very first response that everyone gets to ODC's proposal is, "Oh my God, that's way too much." So I started to think about it. And I realized that everyone that's living there, we have an understanding that, and a sense that this will change our neighborhood, as opposed to just be a minor variance. And I started to look at the different areas around that had some more intensification. So what has happened, what I've seen, I've lived there 10 years, but I've been in town for 35 years. What I've seen in this area is it's been the same as central Waterloo and central Kitchener. You would call it gentrified, that a lot of the old houses that were not looked after and cheap rent have been bought out and renovated, and people have put more into the gardens, and the neighborhood has been developing and developing. And those areas that have been sold and have put up a more higher density than a single family dwelling have been smaller areas. And what have been put up have been, 12 housing units. And none of those developments have changed the neighborhood. They have, the neighborhood has been able to absorb them, and the people that live there may not have children that go to the school, they may not be outside gardening, but there hasn't been any clash at all. And this is the first time that I see people really worried about a big change to their quality of life and to any clashes in the neighborhood, and a concern for a neighborhood that has been developing starting to devolve. So I start to think about, is this a thought-through process, or is this just a one-time thing that you're looking at here? And to me, there's a case for really supporting the central neighborhoods and keeping the neighborhoods not just out in the suburbs. And then there's also a case for intensifying the certain areas, especially the ones that are going to be close to the ion and really easy access of public transit. So I don't see either one as good or bad, but I just want it to be really well thought through so that there aren't big surprises, so that everyone has a say in it. So I just wanted to look at a couple things. One is that the density will change a lot of things in the neighborhood just by virtue of the number of people that are moving around on the streets, whether it's in foot, on bicycle, in cars. It'll just be a lot more, any kind of clashes between people will be more intense. And that's not necessarily be backed away from, but I think it's something that we need to think through. I do not think that there will be the same kind of people move in because there aren't any backyards, so there won't be any young families moving in because they're not appropriate for young children. So unfortunately, the fact that Elizabeth Ziegler is a few blocks away, I don't think will make a difference. Then if you look at people that, if you're looking at a lot of, say, young working people that don't need a backyard or any of that yet, they just, then there's just a little bit different want for the use of the space. For one, traffic's not a problem. For one, the other, for young families it is. Having more little businesses that are right in that whole unit are more of, important for young professional people that are working. Whereas for people that are in the single family dwellings, having those businesses kind of detract from the neighborhood. So there's just different wants of the space. I have a bit of a concern that a decision made to change the zoning for this will open up the door to having a lot more high density, or what you would call medium high density apartment buildings moving into the area and slowly eroding the neighborhood. So the townhouses that have been built in the small lots available haven't put any pressure on changing the height and the huge density of people. Whereas once you start having a decision to have these 6-story apartment buildings, then it'll be kind of easier to make that zoning change continually down the line, and it'll be more of a precedent for the neighborhood, which just means that the single family dwellings and the quality of life will slowly get eroded from what it is now. So I just want that to be something that is considered for the long term and the future. I don't know, is there going to be an informal meeting after this, or should I talk to some of the more specific concerns now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the concerns I want to address for my side, I live on the Moore Street side, whereas Carl was just speaking about the Roger Street side. Traffic going from where we are onto Weber Street going south, i.e. to the expressway or to Kitchener, doesn't exactly follow what is planned. And what I have found is now Weber Street is becoming much more of a major artery because King Street is no longer that artery. So when people are going north, they tend to go more in Union and they go out Union to Weber. But when people are going south, rather than staying on Moore Street because there's speed bumps, they either go left on Graham or Peltz. The next 2 streets Kitchener has put traffic calming, big things to turn around, so that they have diverted the traffic away, so that people won't be going down Moore and then Guelph Street. But Guelph is the quickest way out to Weber. So the traffic will be going down those 2 streets and probably also Roger, because one of the entrances to this development is on Roger. So those 3 residential streets are going to have a huge amount of traffic. And then the problem gets worse because it goes up Waterloo to Guelph. And Waterloo is even narrower. So you really need to study the traffic on those streets to get out to the corner of Guelph and Union, because that will be hugely increased. I'm also a bit concerned always with noise and having that many people close together, what noise problems will occur. So when people are living in our single family dwellings, then There may be noise concerns in terms of parties, and it only travels a certain distance. It interrupts a certain population, a certain number of houses. But as soon as you include such high density, then any noise problems will include all of the people in that development, but also all of the neighbors. So, of course, the farther people are away, the less it is. I know it's less of a concern for me half a block away, and it's a huge concern for the people that live right next door. Because that is something that hugely erodes people's quality of life. I know because I had a big problem and it took 2.5 years to resolve. Property values are also a major problem. Those that are right next door, their property value hugely changes because less people want to live right beside that amount of traffic and that amount of intensity of people. So those people that are living quite close, the property value, and then if they want to move, they have to absorb that loss because to get a similar house in a quieter neighborhood, they're buying in the same market. So that can be a real problem for those that choose, because this neighborhood is greatly changed and we don't want to be here anymore, absorbing a significant loss in terms of making that change. Those that live farther away, I don't think that will be an issue. I think I've come run to the end of my list, and I'm sure my neighbors have a lot more.
And you've come to the end of your time, too, so
Thank
I appreciate
you.
it. Any questions of our delegation? Thank you very much for coming out.
Okay.
I have one more delegation here, which is KLG. So, Kay, if you would, say your name and what city you live in. And you have 10 minutes.
Yes, I'm KLG, and I live in the McGregor-Albert neighborhood in Waterloo. And once I figure out, how do I move this? Oh, there. Okay. Yeah, I'm particularly interested in 119 Roger Street, and that's the part of this development that I want to speak about tonight, because I feel it's an important part of our built cultural heritage, and I would like to see some parts of it retained for our future edification. It has architectural and historical significance. Architecturally, it's the rare, in fact, I don't know of another Waterloo example of Art Moderne architecture. Art Moderne was a style that developed in the 1930s, was built up to about 1950. And like Art Deco, that you may also be familiar with, they're both responses to the age of speed and electricity. And so they were ways that architects and designers tried to incorporate that feeling of excellent design for everyone. Art Deco has been described as a way of doing this for the wealthy. It emphasized exquisite craftsmanship. Art Moderne was something that was more affordable for small business people and so on, but still had that excellent design. And as the Ontario Architecture site says, the new look can be summed up in one word: streamlined. And so we see that this part of the building, now this doesn't apply to the whole building by any stretch, but certainly there's aspects of the existing building that certainly show off Art Moderne very well. Some of the features of it had a horizontal orientation. It had rounded edges. You see that in Art Moderne buildings. This building has some vitrolite over the entranceway, which is very rare in our neighborhood, in our region actually at this point, and chrome hardware. Those are some other things. Also, another part of the building again shows some of the typical features. Also has some glass brick windows. That was quite common with it. Again, chrome hardware, rounded edges, horizontal orientation. We did have another really excellent example of Art Moderne, but it was demolished. So I think this building's quite important for that, to just remind us that of factories and this whole period of our growth as a city. But there's another reason I think that the building is important, and that is its association with a family. Because as I'm sure you're aware, there are two reasons one can designate. There are actually 9 criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act by which a building can be designated, and that means it's worthy of preservation. One of those is it's a rare, unique, representative, or early example of a style, type, expression, material, or construction method. So that's the architectural. The other criteria, which I think applies to this, is that the building has direct associations with a theme, an event, a belief, a person, an organization, an activity that's significant to the community. And I think the association here is with the Levine family. Ron told us a bit about the history. Going back even further, I guess it would be his great-grandfather maybe. The company is anyway founded by Sam Levine, who was born in Russia but living in England, flipped a coin, was it going to be Canada or Australia, ended up in Montreal, and had contact with the Dominion Rubber Company president there, who suggested that he could move to Waterloo to supply dyes for Merchants Rubber. So he formed the Ontario Dye Company, and at first it was located in rented premises in the building that later became Kennard Jewelry in Uptown Waterloo. But then, as we've heard, built the other factory later on. But initially made dyes for all kinds of products that were made, shirt collars, footwear, paper cloth, and so on, and especially developed a niche manufacturing cutting dyes for the city's many manufacturers of rubber, canvas, and leather footwear. All factories that have vanished from our area, well, pretty much vanished from our area. But we've seen the resilience of the company, and the fact that it has gone on to survive. And it's Ron's father, Martin, when he retired in 1992, after exactly 50 years after he started working there, split the Ontario Dye Company into 2 separate companies, which are both still quite productive, as we've heard. So I think that's another reason for the importance of this building, and a reason that we would want to be able to see some parts of it. And remember both the historic significance with the Levine family and the architectural significance of the building. So that's why I would like to see some recognition of this and some preservation of it. So I feel it is an important part of and contribution to our cultural heritage. I feel it does deserve recognition. And to preserve these significant architectural features of the building is, in my opinion, the best way to do this. It's far better than putting up a plaque someplace that somebody might stumble over, or better than reading about it, if we can actually look at some of those wonderful features and be reminded that this was an era of Waterloo's history. This is the one factory remaining of this type that we have. So I think it is important for us to be able to preserve this and show it to people and remind ourselves about it that way. And when it comes down to how you do this, from council's perspective, designating certain features of the building is a way to do that. I'm happy to hear the architects have been chosen, because I think they're quite capable of working with this and reusing parts of the building in the design. Also happy to hear that it hasn't been finalized. But I really love this building for its architectural and its historical significance, and I think it deserves to continue to be visibly possible to be remembered by us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whaley would like to ask you a question.
We always count on thoughtful presentations from UK, and you did it once again. Thank you for your presentation and the information about the building and the owner's family. So I'd like to know if you know whether this particular building is currently designated as a historical building.
I don't believe it is.
What about on our registry? We have a secondary classification, just being on a register. Is it on that register of important buildings?
I don't believe it is. I'm not sure. I only found out about this item by seeing it in the Chronicle last Thursday. So I did a little bit, but as it has been a building that's impressed me for a long time, I thought, here's my chance.
Yeah.
So here I am.
I mean, it's great that you've done the effort to understand, the type of building it is and all that, but without any historical documentation or so-called proof by any authoritative body, how can we ask the company to take its facade and leave it on the property?
I think it's something you might consider referring to the Heritage Committee to look into. I could certainly do some more research on it. I'm certainly willing to work on that, to do that. I'm asking this, not that you would do it tonight, but I wanted to bring this up for consideration in the future.
We don't do it too often in our community, but in many other communities around the country, we are familiar with historic signs. You said that you don't like them, but for me, they're always a point of fascination. I always stop to read them, and usually in both official languages. I only can read them in English, but I'm always impressed that community took the time and the effort to capture, at least in some way, what has come before. But you don't think that having that family story told and the business story told on a historic plaque gives it enough importance or recognition?
To me, it's not the same thing as being able to see, and if I could figure out how to go back, I would take you back to the picture of the building. But to just see that building within this city, yeah, that one, it doesn't look like it's a modern building. It reminds you of something else, I mean, even when you look at it and see that streamlining approach, you think, that looks like a different era. And so it reminds us that we did have a factory in that site, that it was a time when people thought things were everything was streamlined, there was a lot of progress. It's an optimistic time. That is something that you can't picture in the best. I mean, you can try in science, but it's nothing like actually seeing that building and being able to then have a plaque that tells you something about that. It just makes more of an impact. It's a much more significant part of our cultural heritage, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Okay. So that is all of our registered delegations for 10 minutes. We do open the mic up to residents if they would like to speak. So you're welcome to come up to the mic one at a time. All that we ask is that you don't repeat information. So just so everybody knows, we are taking a ton of notes. Yep. And so is the planner that presented at the beginning, and Joel Cotter's here as well. So the notes, the points that you're making, we're making those notes here so that we can go back and talk to the developer about those things. So there's no need to repeat. We've already written those things down. So just make sure that you're bringing new information, and you have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak to us. So could you please give us your name and the city that you live in?
Dawn Parker, City of Kitchener. And just to repeat what you said, there's no need for me to repeat anything. No, that was a joke. I live in the Mount Hope neighborhood at the other end of the cemetery. I'm also in the School of Planning, and I study land markets. So my comments are both as a resident. I don't abut this property, but I'm in an intensifying area. I just wanted to provide some context for this development in terms of our land markets and our changing demographics, not to discount many of the important points that were made. This project potentially supplies housing in what we call the missing middle, which is a higher density, but maybe multi-unit, for instance, a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 3-bedroom, 2 bath, our housing markets have gone crazy. But even before they did, there was a lot of evidence and a lot of evidence for our research that there is demand for this missing middle and the product is simply there. What we've found is many people are willing to downsize if they have a small amount of private open green space or they have access to high quality green space, which is the cemetery. We also find overwhelming demand for families with children for townhomes, row houses, single family detached, but perhaps the reason they're not going for condos is the bedroom and bath balance isn't there. Because of this huge influx of buyers from the GTA, first-time homeowner buyers are being pushed out of the market. And this is an amazingly family-friendly neighborhood, but also can bring in families who started out as young urban residents, met each other, had children, and want to remain in the core, having one or maybe even no cars. So many of us who live in the neighborhood had the lucky opportunity to move in when property values were a lot lower. They've been skyrocketing. This development could, lots of thoughtful suggestions and improvements are possible, but it could provide an opportunity for other people like us to have the opportunity to live in this neighborhood, provide amenities that increase your property values, such as a satellite. We interviewed the bakery owner as part of the Jane's Walk on Saturday, a satellite office of the bakery. And again, my research is showing that proximity to open space, proximity to these high-density amenities, and the LRT corridor is something that increases property values. The relevant point, I'm not sure about the MPAC, but it seems like the relevant point of comparison, this is turning from an industrial use to a medium density or townhome use, and that should be the relative point of comparison for changes in property values. I think if thoughtfully done, and there were great suggestions, this development could increase the property values for local homeowners rather than decrease it as it has perhaps done in some other neighborhoods that didn't have the locational amenities that were going to bring in the high valued buyers. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Come on up and please say your name and the city that you live in.
Hi, my name's Deborah Handler, and I live in Waterloo on Moore Avenue South, right across the street from where this would all be built up. I live right across the street from ODC. Thanks for this opportunity to speak a little bit. I just have 2 points to make. So I did speak with Wendy Fisher on the phone a couple of weeks ago, just after the open house at ODC. And one of the things that I learned is that there is a zoning designation that is in between low and the medium-high mixed use that is being proposed right now, and it's called an enriched low density. So I would like to propose as a compromise in the middle that we might look at that enriched low density as maybe the sweet spot, the zone in the middle where we have some intensification, we have room for new families who do need a place to live, but not at the cost of the flavor and the identity of that neighborhood. So one of the things that I do like about the neighborhood is that I do get to sit outside in my backyard on a Sunday afternoon or on a Saturday and really do enjoy some peacefulness and quiet. I know that if there's 300 families that move in across the street from me, it's not going to be the same. And I think that that is the concern for all of us all there in the neighborhood. Absolutely, we support intensification, but not as the sacrificial animals to make that happen. I guess the second point that I did want to make, and I don't have any hard evidence about this, but when I was at the ODC open house, one of the questions that I did ask is this the proposal? Is this actually what's being proposed? And my understanding is that this is a proposal, but not what's being proposed, because it's very likely that the land is going to actually be sold to a developer who will no doubt have their own plans. It could look like that, but it could look like something else completely differently. So I think that it seems to me what we're really talking about is the zoning and not all those beautiful pictures. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, please come, Mayor Jaworski, to staff.
Maybe staff could provide clarity on this, the difference of the zoning. What's below that in terms of like this maybe enriched, or what's the factual description of it?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are only, I think, 3 or 4 categories. Low-density residential, which is what they currently have today. The next step up is medium-density residential, which is currently the request before us. Following that would be medium-high, and then the final designation of high-density. So those are the categories.
So just for clarity, there actually isn't anything in between. This is actually, this is step 2.
That's correct.
This is only step 2.
That's
okay.
correct.
And then for currently it's zoned industrial use, and we haven't really talked about that, but can it continue industrial use? So say it was sold off to somebody else. Could another industry move in there, and could they, say, demolish the building and put up something of a different scope, scale, as an example?
Again, based on the existing zoning, yes, any industry could come in and just continue on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Your name and the city you live in, please.
Derek Suderman. I live on Roger Street. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a throat issue. I guess I just have 2 things. I don't want to repeat what others have said, but just to give you a very concrete example. For me, it's a bit overwhelming actually seeing the pictures as they were given. Because we moved into the area three years ago. We bought 3 years ago. Very excited about moving into the area, precisely because of many of the things that you've heard about. The walkway. I teach at the university, so I can bike to the university. It's a great area, no question. Girls, daughters go to the elementary school, et cetera, et cetera. What's striking to me is that we live 2 doors down from this proposal, and those 2 apartment blocks, all of those windows will be looking into our backyard and into our back window. So if in our case, it's not a theoretical thing that our property value will go down, depending on how this goes through. It's a very real thing, and especially when you hear, you read in the newspaper that property values in Waterloo are up 40%. Where else are we going to go if our property value sinks as a result of this? And so just to give you kind of a face, it's a very real concern for us. And as people before have said, it's not that I'm against, or we are against, speaking for my family, we are against intensification. We love the area. More families should be in the area. I think it's a wonderful place to live. It's more the scope, and especially 4- and 6-story buildings, or what that looks like, that are looking into our backyard and into our back window. That is a big concern. Our current house also backs onto the cemetery, and so I agree that this functions as a green space, no question. There are people walking their dogs, there are people going for walks. It will be a fabulous walking place for people to get to the Ion, no question. I guess for me, the concern is if there isn't adequate green space in that location, does the cemetery become their backyard? And if the cemetery becomes their backyard, then my backyard is affected by the noise from the apartments, people, who knows what. And to me, I think this is actually one of the differences between this development and the one on Moore. The one that just went in on Moore, the townhouse complex there, that is basically across the street from the school. And so they have access to the school, the soccer field and green space and all of that stuff. Nobody's going to be playing soccer in the cemetery. So when you're thinking about our family's going to move into the area, I wouldn't want to be a family moving into that complex, simply because of the green space issue. So that's just to put a face on that. One other thing just to mention is traffic has been mentioned. But traffic going up and down Roger Street is a real issue. Not just east of Moore, but west of Moore, because people going to the hospital people going to CTV. The CTV camera's gone now, but I've been wanting, I've actually talked to other residents wanting speed bumps on Roger, because we have young children, we have people flying around that corner, virtually a blind corner going really, really fast. And I can imagine 100 households wanting to get there. They're not just going to be taking the Union exit and down. So that Roger Street traffic is also a real concern. And obviously for me, that is, we live, if you look at the satellite map, where you're going down by the cemetery and it goes like this, yep. We're the second house. And so we've almost been clipped by cars coming by who just simply do not look. And so on top of the traffic on intersections and whatever, that to me is a real concern. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in. One more? Two more? Let's go two more, and getting late, everyone. So can we do two more? Does that sound all right? Three more? All right, three more. Your name and the city that you live in, please, and try not to repeat any information. We're taking great notes.
My name is Dwayne Wolf, and we live on 106 Roger Street, directly across from the proposed row of townhouses in apartment buildings. My family's there. My wife doesn't want me to center them, my three boys and my wife.
Hi.
We were, so I just do want to give a little bit of a personal context. We were expropriated from Weber Street 3 years ago and moved into this new house and developed it. Made a major addition, but all within the region of existing zoning, which I would love to see happen at this new place for them to stick with the existing zoning. Our biggest concern, well, the traffic, obviously. We moved into what we thought was a quiet neighborhood, so our boys can access a program easily and safely. And I do share the concerns about especially the CTV truck that goes whipping by our house every day. What did I want to say? Oh, one of the biggest things that raises concerns with me is no one has really focused on it, is the potential for the retail units proposed of stores. And I just imagine some popular coffee shop and people struggling for parking spaces in front of my house. And that's not what we moved into, and that's not what we escaped and spent many years trying to develop here in our new home. Anything else? Yeah, just that. Just we want to put a face, our family's face, to what this is going to affect and what we thought we were moving into.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I saw a hand over here. I recognize you from the meeting. Please name and city you live in.
Ian Campbell. I live in Kitchener, very close to the neighborhood. Just wanted to mention for a couple minutes here. So I've lived in the neighborhood for about 15 years. I've seen a great positive transition through that time. Many of the older homes have been bought by younger families, fixing them up, doing a lot of renovations. I've seen a lot of houses that basically needed to be gutted and totally renovated, turn into really nice houses. There's a lot of kids in the area. I've heard people talk about the side streets and the traffic. There's a lot of kids play hockey on the street, or throw a baseball around or whatever. So I'm concerned on two levels. One is the traffic that's already been mentioned, and the other one is just in general the look of the community. That putting 300 units, in that neighborhood is it's not the right place for it. Just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you for coming in. I had one more hand at the back. Yes, come on in over, sir.
Hi, Kevin Reed, 128 Graham Street. About a month and a half ago, I was sitting on my front porch having a coffee, enjoying the view of Mount Hope Cemetery. And a gentleman came along with some flyers and had a proposal for Ontario Dye, and I met Ron for the first time. And he indicated to me that, you know, they were looking at a 6-story, because we had heard rumor about this going on. I was thinking 20 stories or whatever. He said he's going to, a 6-story condo in behind and some townhouses up front. And I said, oh, that's just great. I've been here 23 years, and I just done an extensive renovation on my house, and I want to stay another 23 years. Thank you, Ron. That's great. I fully support that. I did miss the meeting that they had at ODC, and then I went on the website and saw this. And this is not what sort of my vision would be for this. Absolutely intensification. It's going from industrial to residential. We all want that, but we don't. As far as I don't want that. The proposals that's there. So what's the difference? The difference is a term in real estate called highest and best use. And with highest and best use, so the difference was Ron was talking to me, but he hadn't talked to his planner yet and the planning department. And when he went to talk to them, they said, Ron, you've got this land, go highest and best use based on the zoning. The problem with highest and best use is the term highest is usually with the most productive or the most profit. All right, or in this case, the highest, it's literal as well, because they could actually go for the high density and go for 20 stories, which is, again, we definitely don't want that. So the problem with highest and best use is sometimes the best use does not take into consideration everybody else. And I think you've heard a lot of that tonight, that we basically want things changed. We want to see a different proposal is really what we want. And there's been some papers going around with email addresses and things like that. And I know you kind of shut us down with the applause, but you heard it. There are people who are very upset with this, with the amount that's going on here. All right, and if you can check on a few things, and I know these have been mentioned, but if you can check on a few things for me, please. The height restrictions, 6, 10, 12, or 20. What is it? Meters. I don't know. There were so many numbers that came up there. Does anybody really know what it is? Because I don't. And with the one on Moore Street, the 6-story on Moore Street, that's right on the road. That is, it's monstrosity. That won't work. All right, and the whole idea was, and I think Ron mentioned this, was the nice elevation going down to the back. That's where the condos would be, and then up at the front, you'd have again, I think we've had recommendations on 2, maybe 3 stories as far as the stacked townhouses. Sounds like a great plan. That the historic part, that little corner thing, have that with the Ontario Dye cornice and everything that was there. That was a marvelous presentation, by the way. Perfect, thank you. The other thing, if you can check, the traffic, I know that's been mentioned, but 80 new weekday trips is what was presented here today. There are 300 units going in at 1.2 parking spots per unit. Somebody do the math on that. That's 350 parking spots, and only 80 people are using it a day? I don't think so. I really don't think. I know we would like that. Waterloo would love that everybody's taking the spur line and jumping on the LRT, and we hope that's going to happen. But even I would say half. So there's going to be over 150 at least trips a day going all out, like the people mentioned as well. Green space been mentioned. That's awesome. Apartments or condos. Again, highest and best use would tell Ron, put them all rentals. Because then you have your legacy for the rest of your life. In other words, you have income coming in for the rest of your life. So as opposed to condos where you sell up front and then you get your money there. All right, and invest it hopefully some other way. But so we really need an answer on that. Like coming to the informal part, so the next part's the formal part, and they'll say rentals, and then where are we? You guys are voting on it. So I'd like you to consider that now. Get the answers from them now before that formal meeting would be marvelous for us. And it was probably coming anyways. Thank you. And the technical studies that are being done on all the green space and parking, are these independent studies? Who's doing these studies? If the planning department is doing that, the planning company is doing that, come on. Really? We need independent studies done on these things. And I can tell you now, there's probably some people in here who are going to go start counting cars on their street pretty soon, so that you have a baseline of what's happening now, right? And then later they can start complaining to you guys when they said, we told you so, all right? And so my proposal would be the 2 condos in behind, 6 stories, row houses out front, a little more green space for sure. Again, you've had that. That's probably what I would be doing with that property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, please. Nope. Yes, Mayor Jaworski.
Just for clarity, I think if I recall from that PowerPoint presentation, I think it was those cars were per peak hour. It was net additional per peak hour. So whatever the number was, whether it be 80 or 50 or whatever it was, it would be the net addition per peak hour. And then to staff, in terms of apartment versus condo, what decision-making capability do we have in that? Is that part of our decision-making capability?
Through Chair Durrell to through Chair Durrell to Mayor Jaworski. The application that's before council is an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. The zoning framework, which is the primary piece here, can deal with land uses, building heights, parking ratios, setbacks, those types of things. The decisions around the tenure of the units, being condominium or rental, is not really before council with these planning applications. The applications that will ultimately lead to that decision would follow usually after the site plan and around the building permit construction stage. And that'll be determined by the ultimate builder of the product as to whether they want to do rental or condominium or a combination of both. So that decision really isn't part of what's before council. There, as Ms. Fisher indicated in her presentation, there's a number of other additional approvals if the residential permissions are granted by council for development on this site. There would be site plan requirements, building permit requirements, if the official plan proceeds as proposed, a regional approval as well. In addition to that, condominium applications if the proposal was to be advanced as a condominium development in whole or in part. So those are future decisions through other additional processes, really not part of these planning applications.
And I'd just like to point out that in Ontario, we generally have to do a formal planning formal meeting. And in Waterloo, we've decided that we would like to take the additional step of having informal public meetings, which is what we have tonight, to introduce the topic to all of us as a community. And but to have an applicant actually have their own open house is rare and unusual. So I just I think I think this is a real community coming together here in terms of what is the next phase of the of ODC, and everybody taking a very judicious step towards it, as opposed to other communities where you'd get one and only one chance. So I think we're actually having good community conversation tonight. So thank all the people who were here to present, and the applicant as well.
And I'll remind everyone to sign the registry at the back so that if we do have another community meeting, which I highly recommend before we get to the next formal meeting, something I'd like to see happen. So you will be called, emailed, what have you, informed. Thank you. It's getting late. Sorry, like hour 13 now. So you will be informed of the meeting, and I'll look at doing a public meeting. So if there's no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. It's really important. All right, there are no formal public meetings tonight. Consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting, there's none. Notice of motion, none. Communications and correspondence, none. Regional information and correspondence, none. Unfinished business. Let's move on to new business. Mayor Jaworski, you got, or we can, you know what? KLG's still here, isn't she? Okay, I got a treat for you. Let's do the council minutes from 1867, May 10th and 20th. I dedicate this to Kay and her Jane's Walk. Congratulations on Jane's Walk. It was a huge success. So council met 3 times on May 10th and the 20th in 1867. Council met to organize itself into a court of revision and appeal to assess property values. The court of revision and appeal assessed a number of properties, reducing the values on 13 and only raising the value of 1. No, that's, I know. On May 10th, in a special session, a motion from Jacob S. Royce, was made that all members of the fire brigade who have been members of said brigade since from the first day of January last be entitled to $2 each. We gave the fire brigade a raise. Of note, when the village of Waterloo was incorporated, Springer became the first reeve, a position he held in 1857 to 1861, from 1867 to 1869, and 1873 to 1875. And between 1857 and 1875, he sat on the county council for 11 years. And from 1867 to 1881, he represented the riding of North Waterloo in the provincial legislature. And there he is right there, Mr. Springer. Upon incorporation on February 10th, Springer became the first mayor of the town of Waterloo. He had 2 terms as mayor, and he went on to become the sheriff, which I think Councillor Whaley told us last time he caught someone, and we gave him $2 for that as well. Pay per performance for our sheriff. In 18, we should do it, Chief Larkin might like that. Following his 2 terms as mayor, Springer went on to become, we got that. In 1968, he was honored with the naming of a Waterloo Park in his memory. Moses Springer Park. Let me guess, you were there.
But it isn't, Moses Springer is in my neighborhood.
Yes.
And it's undergoing a rehabilitation in 2017, 2018.
As it should.
And we hope to have hoping to have a historic plaque in the park giving you a little information about this, one of Waterloo's most famous citizens.
Well, we've got some great information here today. I think we're good on this one. There's some German words here that I'm not going to try. But all in all, thank you, Councillor Whaley, for having us do a little history lesson on Canada's 150th birthday every time we come to a committee of the whole. And, probably Councillor Maven will be next up. And Kay, thank you for staying. I know I made you do that, but I appreciate it. We have one more thing to do, and that is you. Mayor Jaworski, you've got a day.
Yes. William Tutt Day. In honor of what would have been Professor William Tutt's 100th birthday and the 50th anniversary of the Faculty of Mathematics on May 12th, a road on the University of Waterloo campus will be named William Tutt Way in honor of Professor Bill Tutt, a professor of combinatorics and optimization department in the Faculty of Mathematics from 1962 to 1995. This is in recognition of Professor Tutt's mathematical achievements during World War II, as well as the instrumental role he played in establishing the identity and reputation of the University of Waterloo Faculty of Mathematics. So many of you will probably know of the Enigma machine, and that was something that was cracked by this group, and he also cracked the Lorentz code. And afterwards, he decided to move to Canada, and subsequently went back for a few years, then moved back to Canada, and lived his final days in our area. So, you never know who you'll run into in Zares or Sobeys in our community, and here we had a World War II hero of epic proportions, living in our community and founding the Faculty of Mathematics. So we'll be naming a road in his honor this week.
That's everything. Who wants to adjourn? Councillor Freeman? Councillor Veith? All in favor? Over to you, Mayor Jaworski.
Welcome to the special council meeting of Monday, May 8th, 2017. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Enactment of bylaws. A mover from Councillor Whaley, second by Councillor Durrell. All those, no discussion, all those in favor. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Whaley, Councillor Durrell, all done. Thank you.